black screen, and up the top it says like, SSO.willowbears, but it's like a black screen, and then I have to re-enter everything in.
When did that start?
3 weeks ago, probably, I was guessing.
Well, mine,
At least, right, at least 2.
mine doesn't do that, but it does something else.
email? I
Weird.
yeah, something's changed.
So-
I'm sure it's updated. You're supposed to have it.
Yeah.
And I sent you a message tonight.
I don't have my account.
That you have the entire board package.
You know what I'm saying? See if you can, I can't get that.
Do you know what's easier to use?
What?
Do I have to say it?
Where am I to process the?
Do I have to say it?
No. I don't know what you're saying, but I click on that one. What? Oh, here we go. Okay, that's a whole other. We're waiting for the MSBA report here just a little bit. You can share your thoughts on that.
You're right.
Oh, here we go. Don't hate.
I can use one.
We almost had a sale at the convention, man.
Just gonna send a PO this
Now
way?
find the attachment.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're fine. I've been open that up.
Okay.
Let's go.
Oh, that's saving to my drive.
Either way is fine. I'm going to be driving.
Did Dean get on?
Did you get in, Dean?
No,
You get the set password.
no, I mean, let me get there by Tom, right?
See if you can highlight that now, so that's what's red.
Right? So it says,
Now, those are all linked together. That's the same thing.
like me that time.
So like you can make it bigger and all this, and like you see the thing.
Did you do that?
All these are linked together, so like you can.
No, I did it at WSDGS.com.
Yeah, how'd you get rid of that little bear? We can't get rid of it.
It went away.
Yeah, as soon as I
So you
started
have to
typing
print
that.
it. 6:30.
Mine didn't.
They were, I think they were playing.
Tried to delete it because it let me in that time.
Did you get in, Dean? Okay, if you find your email, find the email I sent you. I sent you a PDF attachment
I can hold my
that
phone
has the
like
entire
this.
document tonight.
What's the
The
date?
PDF will
Oh, they're in there?
So it's easy to navigate through.
I'm not on cameras.
Just call it in.
No,
No, I did have it on my phone at work the other day when we were in the first round. On my phone went dead, I didn't have a charger.
Okay. That's what it was, man. Never that. Drink the bottle.
version of the agenda, is that what you're after?
Yes. And it's all linked together in PDF form, so if you click on any of the items in the agenda, it will take you to those attachments.
Gotcha.
Then you
I'm
can
in.
navigate back out. Are y'all ready? Is Brett, are you in?
I think I'm.
With quorum being present, I'll call the meeting to order. We've got a copy of the agenda in front of us. Do you have any changes to that, Bill?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have a resignation from Madonna Owens. And also, we have no need for a closed session at the meeting.
Owens, how soon,
Madonna Owens,
when is her resignation?
December 1st.
Are there any questions or comments over the consent agenda items?
Yeah, Mr. President, I'd like to remove the volunteers. It's my understanding that the volunteers are not meant to be approved by the board.
Okay.
Can I preface that a little bit with some of the conversation we had today? Okay. Part of the reason for this is that there's a new statute that was passed that MSBA is in the process of writing a policy about this that requires volunteers to have the same type of background check as all employees have if they're going to be alone with a student in the school environment. And that's kind of the interpretation that MSBA is giving me of a volunteer. In the course of that conversation, they also shared with me, it's not necessary for the board to approve all of your volunteers, and that's really an administrative function anyway. And so what I would suggest, based on that conversation, that moving forward, that we handle volunteers within the administrative process. And handle that way, we will determine if and when that background check is necessary for whatever volunteer activity they're going to provide to the school district. All right, and so we'll just handle that on a case-by-case basis. But in the future, then, I'd recommend that these not come to the board for approval, based on MSBA's recommendation.
Have they clarified yet who's going to be responsible for the fee for the background check?
That will be up to, well, we'll handle that internally. That may be something I come back to the board with. Right now, the cost of a background check is what, $45? And so the answer to that, I had a long conversation with Mr. C earlier today, is I think in very few situations do we place volunteers in a situation where they're alone with a child. I mean, we just don't structure it that way. And so part of that's going to be administrative responsibility in terms of how they set up volunteers and what they use volunteers and how they use volunteers for. But if we have a situation where that needs to occur, then we will have a background check, and more than likely, if we have a need for that volunteer, then to me, it's going to be a case-by-case basis, and the number of times we do it probably will be minimal. But in that case, probably we will pick up the cost of it ourselves, because we feel like there might be a need to have a volunteer in that position, for whatever reason. But that will be handled on a case-by-case basis. If we decide to do a lot of them, and it needs, then I think we need to come to the board for a decision on that. Yeah, but right now, I think if it's a small amount, then I think the district would just pick up that minimal cost. But to give you an example, I mean, tonight we had 15 or 20 volunteers. Most of them were the kindergarten mentoring program. And that's going to be handled, really, they're just going to eat lunch with the kids in the cafeteria. So that's not really necessary to have each of them have a full-fledged background check. We're still going to go through the process that we have Officer Moore do, and he will go on, he'll Google things that he can find, go through CaseNet, see if he can locate anything there. If they come from out of state, he searches the area where they came from to see if there's anything in the crime logs or anything like that. So we'll still continue to do that background check on all of our volunteers. But if it's something that needs to be more detailed, then we'll handle that case by case and do that internally. But in the future, you won't have volunteers come to you for approval at the board meeting. So I don't know if there's any questions related to that. But. Okay, all right.
Any other questions over the consent agenda items? I'd receive a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted with the exception of the volunteer list.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Shane. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Very well. Administrative reports. Marty, you're first on the list.
All right. You've got the numbers, the of note items. We'll go through some sports and band information. Our Bear Pride Band is doing really well. They have been best in class in all 3 competitions they've competed in this season, so it's a pretty phenomenal job. They've got tons of trophies sitting in my office, so doing a really nice job. Cross-country team was the Berryville champs, and they got a really big trophy for that. They went to Arkansas and won that cross-country meet. Our football team is currently number 3 in the district. Our tennis team had the best record maybe in history. We're still checking on that, but I think it's way up there. They won the Waynesville tournament for the first time in school history. And just today, Riley Poole in singles and Kenna Cox and Taylor Reese in doubles, all 3 of those girls competed in the state sectional tennis tournament in Kansas City and fell short, but great accomplishment for all those girls. Might mention launch. We're doing some good things with launch. It's been a very smooth year for that. We have 7 students that are currently working on launch courses, 4 students that are completely doing launch off campus, and then 4 students that are taking launch courses on campus. We had a FAFSA night last week that Mrs. Patton put on, and I think that went really well, and we're going to have another one of those, I think, coming up probably around Christmas time. Some big upcoming events that you'll see on our notes there. We have student-led conferences, which everybody has parent-teacher conferences coming up on Thursday. We're going to try student-led in the high school. That's a new thing for us. I know elementary's been, was it last year that you guys started that?
Yeah, kindergarten did last year, and we're gonna be building wide this year, so.
I think that's a bit of a change in what high school parents are used to, but hopefully it's a good change to get some of those parents back engaged with what their students are doing on the high school level. So that'll be on Thursday. A couple other just of notes in those long upcoming events there. October 22nd, we have an OMC externship. We're going to take some of our teachers down to OMC, and OMC is going to put on a day kind of tutorial about all the careers and jobs that students have available in the medical field, and specifically through OMC, and that way our teachers can take that back to the students and explain to them a little bit better about some opportunities that they have in the medical field. So we're excited about that. And then the following day, very next day, we'll go back to West Plains with a different group of teachers and look at Project Lead the Way and how West Plains does that at the high school level. Dr. Spencer in the middle school, you saw their presentation on that, and the hope is that maybe we can bleed that into the high school as well, and kind of see how that looks at a high school setting.
And I think Bobby is also going as well on the elementary side to take a look at what they do at the elementary level as well, and see if we can somehow replicate that, how they do that, so.
You said you have, on the launch program, you said you
Yes.
have 4 kids that are taking all classes. What's the reasoning behind that?
For very different reasons.
Okay.
Family situations mostly.
Okay.
And of course, with state law, we have to allow that now. Launch is our preferred provider, and that's been a really good thing this year. And there's a wide variety of things we could discuss with that.
Okay.
That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for Marty?
Yeah, I have a couple, Marty.
Sure.
Parent-teacher conferences from 2 to 7,
Yes.
and the middle school's from 2 to 5?
No, that was a typo, I'm sorry.
Oh.
My finger got on the wrong key. It's
Oh,
2 to 7, just like
sure,
everybody else.
sure it
So
is.
sorry.
I see what.
Marty, I want to ask you a question about the ADA page. I'm just, it isn't the right or wrong question.
Okay.
So I noticed that there's some differences between the high school page, the middle school page, and the elementary page. And I'm really just trying to understand the need for those differences.
Okay.
So the only difference that I can really see is resident and non-resident, total enrollment, hours attended, and average daily attendance. So what should I be doing with that information? You know what I'm saying? I mean, is it,
Just FYI, I
Okay.
mean, from my vantage point.
I copied Mr. Cottingham's form because I wanted it to look similar or like the others. So
right.
I copied his and we include the same information he does.
Do I need to include some, do you guys have something I don't?
Well, no, the only thing that, no, you have non-resident and resident, they don't. That's really the only difference. And I'm just curious, because I don't know the significance of those numbers.
Okay.
So I
Is that
just,
just
Yeah.
KA?
I just
Now,
want
I
to
would
know.
assume I would assume those non-residents are the KA kids coming in.
Okay.
high school
Yeah,
year.
that would make sense. Yeah.
So, that's why you have that, and they may not necessarily have
We
that.
shouldn't have any.
So you wouldn't have that category, and
We-
that's what that indicates.
Yeah.
That's what I need.
That would make sense.
Okay, that's all I wanted. I wanted to know who they were.
Correct.
Okay. Yep, that's all I got.
Anything else? All right, here, your next on the list.
Joke, you can see the numbers. Our attendance is holding steady. We're staying right there, 95, 96%. We have, coming up in the next few weeks, this week we have first quarter student attendance rewards. We're moving to a tiered system this year. Everyone gets included in the reward process. But there will be 3 tiers of rewards. The teachers have come up with, each grade has several different options for students to choose from as their reward, and we'll be letting them pick that here in the next couple of days. Just trying to let them have some voice and choice and not say, here's your one reward for everybody, because not everybody enjoys doing the same things. For instance, 5th grade has 3 choices. They can go to a room where they can have board game time, or they can go to a room where they have some free time on the computer, supervised of course, or they can go outside. So they can choose from those 3. Our fall sports seasons are all in their last week. We have a volleyball game tonight, tomorrow night, and then Thursday night's our last football game. And they've worked hard this year. Tonight was a home cross-country meet, and our middle school cross-country runners are doing quite well this year.
Can I tag in on that real quick? It was the SCA meet, although not officially SCA, but we're going to claim an SCA champ. Cole Chafin won the SCA championship for boys, and Bethany Wagner was second. So very good finish for our cross-country kids. Sorry.
And we've got some good middle schoolers coming
Oh,
up
yeah.
that are going to carry on that. Our parent-teacher conferences are from 2 to 7. I apologize for the typo. And we also have the book fair going on this week. That's been a big deal. Monday, the 21st, we have a PD day, and they will be vertical teaming, and we will also be meeting with the high school for part of that. We're really working hard on seamless curriculum and process, pre-K through 12. So we're meeting with the high school during this next PD day, and then the November one we'll be meeting with the elementary teachers, and we're just seeing where can we close some gaps between buildings. So We're also working on formative assessments, we're looking at our data, we're just trying to get all the information we can to see what we can do better. We have PD coming up with MMD and RPDC consultants for science, math, and social studies. ELA did some work here a couple of weeks ago, and they're just really digging in and looking at, again, weak areas and where we can improve. Celebrations, we are proud of all of our student athletes. They all work hard. And we have lots of new instructional strategies going on in the classroom. You can walk through our building and it's noticeably different. You see students up and around in classrooms and they're doing a lot of hands-on activities. It looks different here in the last few weeks. We have beautiful new awnings and new glass in our entrance doors, and they look really sharp. Josh did our awnings, and then they looked so good we needed new glass. They were fogged between the two glasses and you couldn't see in or out. And they look really nice. Our attendance is holding quite well. Right now we're Aspire testing. We'll have those results at the end of the month for 3 of the 4 grades. One of the grades is summative testing and theirs has to be graded and it takes a little longer to get back. And that's made for kind of a long month. Each grade takes a week and it takes 4 to 5 days for each grade to test. But we're getting through it. Teachers have kept good attitudes about it and everybody's powering on through it, so that's all I've got.
Can you just help me with the acronyms, MMD and RPDC?
Okay, MMD is Missouri Model District. We are a model district and we are in the cadre that is considered the model for the models. And the RPDC, those are our consultants out of Rolla that do a lot of our professional development.
And that is, do you know what it is?
Regional Professional Development Center.
Thank you. I just can't keep one straight.
I'm really sorry.
A lot of acronyms.
Well, that's in there.
Any other questions?
I can't write it either.
Oh, I would like to invite anyone on Thursday. Mr. Wake is actually going to be in our STEM lab and have some of our students' STEM projects out for people to come by and look at and come by, see our new lab. We have the 3D printer. We finished our first quarter, so new students come in this week to start this quarter, and they did some really good stuff in there. They learned to use SketchUp, which if you watch Fixer Upper, that's what they use to design their houses, and the students were working on that, and they can design a house for you. They did some good things in there.
What time is that?
He'll be in there from 5 to 7, the whole time parent-teacher conferences are going on. Oh, I'm sorry, from 2 to 7. I for some reason, I have something to do at 5 o'clock. I am just trying to get some time off. I'm sorry. We will be there from 2 till 7.
Are you sure?
Yes, maybe, I don't know.
Thank you. Bobby?
We have student-led conferences, like Marty had mentioned, building-wide. Last year, kindergarten did them for the first time, and then this year we decided to go building-wide. So we're prepared for that. Ours are actually 1 to 7 because we give some flexibility to parents because we schedule every conference. So they have a designated time to be there, and we need that extra time to get everyone in. October 21st is our PD day. We're going to use it as a data day. We'll be reviewing our iReady data, and that's also when we transition our tier groups for intervention. So if a student is moving out of a intervention or moving to a higher level intervention, that's when we have that collaboration to decide that movement. Other than that, celebrations, you guys were involved in the playground party tonight and could see just over and above what pea gravel we had and the equipment that was 20 plus years old at least, and you know, the kids love it. So fortunate to be able to do that. Fall field trips are underway. We got some 3rd grades going to Laura Ingalls Wilder, 2nd grade to Smallland Cave in Ozark, kindergarten to Twin Pines, and we had some grade levels go to the pumpkin patch. And a couple of things I failed to mention. While Andrew has done a great job, we have a technology rotation. Each year we plan to replace certain labs in our building. Unfortunately, we had a 2nd grade lab that died a little early this year. But through PTO and our G&W receipts that we collect and the West Plains Bank donation that we got, we were able to replace that lab. Andrew called me up one Friday afternoon and said, hey, they're having a big sale on Chromebooks. Now would be the time to buy if we could, and we saved over $1,200 and we're able to replace that lab without using any school funds. So that's a big blessing to be able to do that. And today we had our first Rise and Shine for the year. Just so you know, we used to do it monthly. Actually, when I first came, they did it weekly, every Monday. Officer Moore, you know, every year is like, we really need to limit the opportunities that we open ourselves up to, you know, the public, just safety reasons. So we cut it back to every other week. And then last year, monthly. This year, we're doing it quarterly. So today was the first day. We recognized 50 students on the character trait honesty. So the teacher picked 2 students per grade or per classroom, recognized 50 kids today. It went very well, and so we're just doing 4 character traits this year, 1 each quarter, and it's good to recognize kids for honesty and doing the right thing. So it went very well, well attended.
So we're not doing any reading awards?
That's up for each grade level. The AR has kind of been put on the back burner with the new reading series. We're kind of, started to say knee deep, but we're probably a little deeper than that. In the reading series, it's taken more time to instruct and to make our way through it. So, but we transitioned reading awards from a big public gathering to each grade level just had their own assembly. Typically, they would reserve Grimes for that, and they just do it by grade level.
And how often are they doing that?
They do that once a quarter.
Each quarter also?
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, thank you. All right, moving on. We've got Mrs. Newell here to do an update on the OMC clinic.
Yes. Did everybody get the planners? I know
Yes.
I sent some with Mr.
Yes,
Paul.
we handed those out to the board.
I brought extras in just in case. The hospital, some of these little tablets to hand out. So updates for numbers for the clinics. To date, including today, we've seen 163 people total. 23 of those were teachers that I saw during the school hours, okay? Because one of the quality pillars that I'm tracking for the clinic is how many people that we can keep in school, okay? So if they come to see me at 7:30 in the morning or anytime after 3, I'm not tracking them because that would not necessarily affect their school attendance. During school hours, so far, we have seen 58 students. 14 of those I did have to send home because of either something contagious or a fever or that. But the rest of them were able to be sent back to class. So that's a very good percentage there that we have. So far, the freezers for the vaccine program were ordered 2 weeks ago, so I'm expecting them this week or next week. And the vaccine program, again, is to give the vaccines to the kids who have no insurance or are on Medicaid, okay? Kids who have private insurance, like through Coventry, Cox, the Meritain through the hospital and that, theirs still gets filed through that, but the state vaccine program helps to cover the cost for kids that don't have insurance or on Medicaid, because Medicaid does not pay well to the hospital for those vaccines. So that should be up and going here within the next month. So things that we have been doing as a clinic to get more involved in the school and try to help out more. I've dedicated that we would do one concession stand. We would staff the concession stand for one evening for every sport for a home game. And so far we've done 4 so far. We did a softball game, junior varsity football, was it a volleyball game? I was at something else too, cross country. I was at a cross country game too. And then we've got the varsity game coming up next Friday that we will be at. We're not taking the money, the school kids, whichever one is allotted to, we're just staffing it for the night for the teachers. And so far, we've not messed anything up too badly for them. So they have not fired me yet, but, so we have sponsored a basketball game night, and I cannot tell you the night, where they're gonna give out something called rally towels. I do not know what those are. I think they're, yeah, these little things they throw up. So I don't know what basketball game it is. I know the school chose which game it was though, so we will be there handing out those to the players. OMC did commit to a scholarship for a senior student, and I believe it's $2,500. And it will be a student who is going into some type of a medical field. So we did commit to that. I supplied the money for the CPR card, so the school will not have to pay any money for that. So those are covered. There are 51 students that will take the CPR training this semester, so they are covered. What else have we done? This Thursday night at parent-teacher conferences, the Interact Club is handing out food bags, and so we will be there to help those kids. They came and asked us to help do that. I have attended a Rotary meeting and a Lions meeting here in town. Those went very well. I've went to several staff meetings with the teachers and that. I've also been to the wellness meetings with Jim Taylor, and we're still trying to figure out exactly all what we can do, because that meeting's kind of in a transition since Jim will be gone after May. So we're trying to figure out sustainability and what they've done in the past and how we can continue maintaining that going forth. And I don't quite know all of how OMC will fit into that, but we'll fit in somewhere, obviously.
Just for clarification, the grant will be gone.
The grant will be gone.
Right.
Okay. Okay. All
Just for
right.
clarification, since
So-
we are on YouTube world right now. You know, but this is the 5th year of a 5-year grant.
Okay,
So we are
okay.
kind of working through some transition on that deal right now.
Okay. I am sponsoring a senior, Carson Lowe, for his senior project this year. He's doing something, we're going to do a health job fair where we're going to have about 45 to 50 people from the 3 local area hospitals. We're going to do St. Francis and Mountain View, Texas County, and then also OMC. And we've made a list of about 45 or 50 medical positions, and we're gonna find people here locally that work those positions that can come, and Carson's job in this is to research the schools in this area that people can go to get the degree to do what they do, how long it took them to go to school, the average salary in it, and then those people that do those jobs will be there to talk to kids who are interested in going into that field. So right now, we've had many committed from OMC. We got to do some work on the other 2 though, but I think we'll get there. And that is scheduled for February 5th. And Mr. Hall is hoping also that we will open this up to the district, so hopefully we'll have other schools attend this too. So this will be a great way to start intriguing some kids into going to healthcare jobs.
This was one of the things that came out. I was really impressed that Carson selected this as a senior project, because I believe it's a real need, not for our community, but for the entire region. And it kind of came out of a SOAR meeting that we had a few months ago, and Cynthia Weatherford was there. She's the executive director of Mercy Hospital, and was concerned just with the lack of finding good healthcare people, you know, in multiple areas, whether it's MTs or respiratory therapists, you know, or whatever. They just can't find them, and really wanted the schools to be able to do more, which I think is fair to an extent. But I think it's important that kids become aware of what's out there and the careers that are available to them. And so I think, I met with Carson, and the way he had kind of had big plans, but the way he has it figured out, I mean, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to come out really well if he does it and does it right. And I know he will, because he's putting forth 100% effort on it. So it's going to be very well done. He's already reached out to hospital administrators and done all that. So it's going to be something, hopefully when we get it set up, you said February 4th, 5th, I thought it was 4th, it's one of those 2, but I would encourage, it'll be during the day, but if you guys can all get away, I would encourage you to come and be part of that. You might be part of it, you might be part of that, I don't know, you may be a vendor, but I would encourage, because he's reaching out to all kinds of health service providers to talk about a career in their area.
Yeah.
And to get kids
And that was one of
interested.
the big parts, is that, building up healthcare fields, and they think of a nurse or a doctor. Well, they don't think about the sleep lab technician. They don't think about physical therapy, occupational therapy. They don't think about medical coding. They don't think about dietary. They don't, there's so many jobs that go into a medical field that we have down here. So it's really, hopefully, just to kind of educate them and open their world up a little bit, that they've got many, many choices even right where they're at, so. So we're working on that. Mr. Taylor recently hosted the Walk to School Day, and OMC is helping to provide, like, he's making like little goodie bags, so we're gonna provide like backpacks with jump ropes and frisbees and stuff like that, so that way he can give out to the kids for that. I think that's about it. I had on my list. Oh, and I made these for, I don't know if you guys want to see these or not, but these are little forms that I made just as a communication tool with the parents, so that way when their kids come to the clinic, if they're at work and they don't, then I send this form home. And it's all information that I've went over on the phone with them, but especially for like divorced families, if I talk to mom but the kiddo's going back to dad that day, then they have this in the backpack and they know what I did, what I diagnosed him with, a prescription, if I need to see him again, that kind of thing. So it's just a communication tool for the parents to have there, so. Yeah, I think that is it for me, unless you guys have questions or requests or.
I just have one question, and because I missed out on the very first part. It was before school. You saw how many people, or like teachers or kids? You did a before school hours. This is how many people I've seen. What was that number?
Before school hours, so total in all,
Like
I've
at
seen.
7:30, or
I didn't track from 7:30 to 8, but
Okay.
total in all time frames, I've seen 163 total, and that has been from Monday, August 12th.
Okay, got it. Okay.
That's total that
Okay.
I've seen.
Okay.
But then between 8 and 3, only during school hours, I've seen 23 teachers and 58 students.
Okay.
It was 160 some, that's in, actually 2 months to today. right?
Yes. So, and just to put this in perspective here, is that kind of a goal for a clinic, like what OMC is going to look at financially, is going to be about 15 patients a day. I'm very under that, but we've only been open essentially full-time for 2 months. And so I'm not concerned, especially starting to go into cough, cold, flu season. I think that that's going to pick up quite a bit. I don't have a lot of consistency yet, but again, we are new, so that does not concern me. We had like 3 days in a row where I was seeing 10 every day, and then we had 2 days where I saw none. So, I mean, again, it's 2 months, and I'm really not too concerned about that. And the more that the parents use it, they understand how it works and that, and that word of mouth spreads better than any type of advertising that you can come up with. So we're starting to have more community members come in, which I think is great. And we even have had several come up from West Plains, and I don't quite know why, but I think I saw 3 in the last month that attended school at, is it Rogers, is the elementary? Richards. And they came up there for some reason. I don't know quite,
Well,
I don't know
may be
how they
like
found us or anything.
Non-resident kids, were they adults or kids?
They were kids.
Well, they may go to
It
school.
could have been our kids, yeah. It could have been our.
We have some kids from there.
What, were they high school age?
No, these
Oh,
were
they were younger
elementary
kids.
age kids, yeah. Yeah,
Madison.
Yeah, it could be.
yeah, maybe. So I thought that was interesting, but.
You talked about some vaccinations. Is that stuff that they can get at the health department, that the health department
Yes.
provides?
The problem is that with the health department, it's just the inconvenience that they're only up here, what is it, 1 day a month, I think it is, that they're
Okay.
up here. And then, sometimes, do they do a full day? Is it like an 8-hour day or a 6-hour day or something like that? So if the parents are gone, if they're working, they're more than welcome to use that. But
Okay.
this would be something that,
Just another
like next year, when they have kindergarten roundup, we can be present that night, and when the school nurses are there and give them the list of vaccines and they're looking at their immunization card, and they're short 1 or 2, they can come straight to the clinic right then and get caught up. They don't have to go and make an appointment with their primary care. They don't have to go clear down to West Plains.
But you will bill them, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They will get an office visit for that, but if they have no insurance or they have Medicaid, they will not get billed for their vaccine. That would be free. So like on somebody who has no insurance, the only bill that they'd be paying then is the office visit, but not the vaccine. And some of those vaccines are $700 or so. So I mean, yeah, I know they're probably still gonna end up with like a $150 visit, but they're not gonna have that multi-$100 vaccine charge that they have to have in order to go to school, so. 8th grade, the HPV, the tetanus booster, the meningococcal vaccine, we'll be able to do those, and then the seniors also need that, so we'll be able to do that. We had several calls about foreign exchange students, because a lot of their vaccines that they give overseas are different. One of the girls, they have meningeal strain C over in Spain, and we never see that over here. So our vaccine is for strains A and B. So she thought she was up to date, but she had to go and get another vaccine to cover for what we have here in the US. So, oh, and DHC, all of that is sorted out, and they are doing the counseling sessions with the kids. So WP has been coming, and him and Mr. Williams are the ones who are registering the kids and doing that with them. So, and that's not happening in the clinic. I don't know where they're at, do you know where WP is? So he is not in the clinic. And so if there's any scheduling issues or anything like that, that has to go through Mr. Williams, because him and WP are the ones who are working that out. It actually has nothing to do with me at all, so.
The WP is in, Marty's in multiple buildings?
Yeah, Tino, he's in
Okay.
middle school and high school.
Yeah, he's kind of struck for us.
Is he down in elementary too?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not, he doesn't meet them in elementary, I know that.
He uses a room in our building and one in the street.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Policy revisions.
I had the opportunity, first of all, met with Shane and Farrell and Brent, reviewed all the policy revisions and suggested policy revisions from the MSBA. This is the second round of them. The first round were just a few, over a minute, right around July. This is the second round. I visited with MSBA today. They said the fall version is still coming out, and there will be quite a few updates, and he said that's a big package. Because they're currently working on the wording that's coming out because of all the legislative changes that occurred at the last session. So I just want to kind of run through some of these. If you have specific questions, I emailed out the policies in their entirety to you earlier last week, so I hope you had an opportunity to kind of review these, and if you generate any questions. I will say in the meeting that I had with Shane and Farrell and Brent, there were a few changes. Most of these are because of changes in state law, and you have to kind of follow whatever they have. Now, there are a few things that I won't mention to you that came out as a result of my conversations with the school nurse, and I'll share those when we get to that. The first one is policy BCC. Now, the only things I bring to the board are policies. Procedures, we handle those administratively. And so the things that I'm bringing to the board for consideration this evening for approval are specifically policies. And the first one is BCC, this is appointed board officials. And all I really did on that one was specify really and spell out the responsibilities of the board secretary and the board treasurer. And many of these things, as you kind of look through those, they're things that Mandy does anyway as the board secretary. The other one I'm going to bring up, though, is currently Brent, I believe, is the treasurer. Is that correct, Brent? And one of the things that they really focus on that in a different policy is they really suggest that whomever the treasurer is that's appointed by the board, that really probably be somebody who's actually doing treasurer duties and not just a title. And because there's a lot of boards who appoint a treasurer, but they really also suggest that your treasurer be bonded. Now, thankfully, Natalie is bonded, and I believe you are as well. And so we have bond insurance through, I believe, music, and so we're covered on that. But I will suggest to the board, it doesn't have to happen right now, it's a recommendation, but I do believe when we do reorganization of the board in April, that at that point in time, we appoint Natalie Rogers as the board treasurer, and Manu will still be the board secretary. And so I would suggest at that point, that's kind of what we do. But for the purposes of this evening, I just wanted to verify that. That first policy, again, unless you had questions, a lot of it just spelled out the responsibilities. and what they do anyway. It's kind of a job description, so.
So currently, just for clarification, our treasurer is not bonded.
Our treasurer's not bonded, because that's Brent.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Our bookkeeper-
So we have some
our book-
exposure there,
Our
right, Kate?
bookkeeper is bonded.
Yeah.
Wow, and the person who's doing the work is bonded.
Right, and that's the
I'm not worried about
most
Brent,
critical.
because I don't think he's gonna screw it up.
Well, I'm not worried about him screwing it up, but he's liable if she screws it up.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
That's what I'm worried
Well,
about.
that was roundabout way of firing me. I mean, really.
Well, you know, firing, prison.
That's right.
Yeah. There is
I'll
that.
take the firing.
So, did you have any questions on this one?
No, but can we get him bonded? Or is that like something you have to do July 1st
No,
when
it
you
just
sign up
costs
register?
extra.
Yeah, just money. I mean, it
Just
costs.
costs extra.
It costs money, and they would say that you're bonding somebody who is not going.
Not touching the money
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, why bond them? They're not, there's no exposure there,
There's,
you know.
there's some
But Natalie's bonded, and that's what exposure
litigation,
could be.
litigational.
Yeah, it's kind of an
That's-
issue, but I think we can survive.
I think you're right, if we skate for the next 6 months and
Yeah,
then
we'll
just
be fine.
stop it.
We'll be fine,
Okay.
so. All right. The next one is DFA, and this is one, and I appreciate Adrian bringing this to my attention, because I did send it out in the original, and so you caught it. The reason I did send it out is because it only needs to be approved by boards if we use a registered investment advisor for our investments. All of our investments right now go through Landmark Bank. We do not use an IRA. I contacted John White, and he wasn't sure exactly what our RIA was. And so from that, I assumed that we don't have one. And so we don't work with them directly. Landmark doesn't work with one, so there's really no need to pass that policy. That's only if you work with an RIA.
Because that's on the MSBA website under Willow Springs. So like, it's in our book. So,
Right.
do we
Well,
need
but
it
we
in the
will-
book?
But when we talk to Kay Marchese, is it Marchese? We will tell her that's one that we do not use an RIA, therefore we will not adopt that policy.
Okay.
All right, so, questions on
It's
that one?
DFA.
RIA, oh, DFA, that's policy DFA, I'm sorry. Was that a question or a comment?
No, I'm just making sure.
Okay.
That was,
That's DFA, yes.
Correct, you
All right, the next one is DH, and that's for bonded employees, and this is where we talk about making sure that your treasurer is actually the person who's actually doing the work. And on top of that, that they be bonded as well. And so this is the one where we will come, when we reorganize in April under this policy, I would recommend to the board that we designate or appoint Natalie Rogers as the board treasurer. She does all the functions of the treasurer anyway. And so if you had any questions related to that. DI, fiscal accounting, I think that's where we're at. That is the one that requires, in the interest of transparency, that all of our monthly reports, which is a report of our expenditures and revenues year-to-date, monthly and year-to-date, be posted on our website. We started doing that back in September, I believe. And so we already have those out there, and they have to be in searchable format so that patrons can go there and they can search. Basically, we'll be looking at the same thing we look at every month. And so the day after the board meeting, we will post that on our website, and then we'll have the same monthly reports that you have. And we'll be able to search those, and they have all of our tracers, they have our expenditures. The only thing I need to look at is in the event that we have student names on those, we might want to redact those. I don't know. I mean, I think that's just in the interest of FERPA and everything else. I still, even though I think it's an open document when you have it, I'm not sure we're on our website, so. But we'll monitor that very closely, but we've already started doing that, so. Any questions on DI? EBBA, and there were a number of them related to illness, medication, administration medication, and so forth. I had Janet Newman, school nurse, look over all of these. This one in particular talks a lot about, just mainly on CPR instruction, and they wanted to modify that to reflect state law. And a lot of that is the position of this district that we encourage our staff to get CPR certified. And to make sure that we have people strategically trained in our buildings, especially where we know that we have medically fragile kids. And we do a good job of that. Right now, we have all of our kids, I think all of our kids take CPR at the high school, do they not, with Judy Tillett? So we have that now, and we send her off to get training to where now they can actually, she's a certified instructor, so they will actually have the card and everything when they complete. Now we can utilize her for a lot of our CPR instruction for our staff as well. Right now, the only folks that are required to have CPR and first aid instruction are our coaches. You know, but we're going to expand that to include other folks as well, since we have somebody internally who can provide that training without any additional cost. And so we have that in place right now. Next one is GBCB.
Can I back you up? I want to back you up to EBBA if you want, and I know we're not reviewing those. I just wanted to make a
You
note.
talking on the procedures, or are you talking on?
It's a procedural piece. But I just wanted to share with the board something I learned at the conference. And that is this ad of Narcan to our onboard medications in some districts has led to addicts doping around school property because they know they're overdose protected. So, and I don't know if that's a concern for us here in Willow at this point in time, but it's something to bear in mind.
Yeah, and we actually, one of our, well, maybe it was, I thought it was, maybe it was on the procedures, I thought it was in one of the policies as well. They talk about Narcan.
They do JHCD.
Yeah, and that was one that I visited with Janet at length about. And she understands the reason, she can get it. I mean, she'll get it through Dr. Shaw's office. There needs to be some training in terms of how to administer it.
Right.
And I don't know, I mean, Farrell wouldn't know this, but I think a lot of it's just kind of like the EpiPen. Isn't it?
Yeah, it won't hurt you.
Yeah, the ones you guys would be administering would be like their auto injectors.
Right, right. And so you can't really screw it up, I
No.
don't think. And my understanding, I didn't know what it was, but they said it's just basically to increase respiration.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Okay. And so now we're required to have that.
If you're not overdosing, taking it won't hurt you.
Right.
If you are overdosing, it can
Right.
save your life.
Exactly.
Unless it's meth.
Unless it's meant, has to be an opioid.
I just thought it was interesting that it's actually led to some problems in some districts. I'm sorry to
No, you're
interrupt.
fine, you're fine. Okay, the next one that we have is GBCB, and that's one that's interesting. We had GBCB and then we had GBCBB, which one really spelled out staff conduct, and I don't know if you read through that, but, I mean, as you read through that, I'm not sure there's really anything that we can disagree with. That, well, yeah, we expect that. Well, yeah, we expect that too. And so I think the wording on that was fine. I think those are our expectations that we should have for all of our employees. You know, things such as if you have an issue, you need to take it to your immediate supervisor. Conduct needs to be professional at all times. Active participate in professional development, you know, things of that nature. These are things that, well, yeah, of course. And so they kind of tightened up our staff conduct policy, which I think is a good thing. But then on the flip side of that, they went to GBCBB, which is the whistleblower provision. So they wanted to have protections and make sure that employees understood that they have not only a right, but an obligation that if they see things within the system concerning operations, or to see things within the school district where somebody may be violating policy or violating law, they have an obligation to report that, and they are protected. In other words, your employer cannot come after you and fire you, or in any way discipline you if you brought forward something that you felt was being done wrongly, or being done wrong, or violation of law, policy, whatever, that you should not be punished for that. On the flip side of that, they have a clause in there that also states that if you bring things forward that are nonsensical, and you just kind of make it up to get mad because you're mad at somebody, then you can be disciplined for that. But it's kind of just protects folks that come forward because there's issues within the school district, and they want to make sure that it gets brought to light. So I don't know if you guys had any questions about either one of those two policies. Again, I think they're subject to, state law, state legislation, so we're passing around that, so. And the next one is GCL, and this will be applicable to our school district. And Marty mentioned it a few minutes ago, he has a group going to OMC externship here. When is that again?
October
Right.
22nd, 3rd.
So we have that group, and not only that, but Dr. Spencer has also written a grant through DESE that will allow us to provide teacher externships on a regular basis and provide stipends for those who choose to do that. If it's outside school hours, it will pay for the cost of the substitute if they choose to do that during school hours, and it will promote teachers to go out and work with industry to find out, as an extension, what are some skills that the kids need to have in the area that I'm teaching that you expect as an employer that I need to come back to my kids and I need to affirm with them and focus on and make sure that we're doing that. And so I think it's a really good opportunity to connect our school district with industry in very important ways. What this particular policy allows is for folks who do hours on teacher externships to use those hours for recertification purposes, and DESE's recognizing them. They're saying, we see those as viable learning experiences, as long as you document them, as long as they're sponsored through the school district, then we can allow you to use some of those hours for recertification. It's not for movement on the salary schedule. but only for recertification purposes. And the same thing for district-offered dyslexia training. To be able to use that, DESE will recognize that for movement on, for not for movement, but for recertification purposes. So that's the gist of what that particular policy is all about. I don't know if you have any questions about that or not. JGGA is seclusion, isolation, and restraint. We talked a little bit with Larry about this. The change in this policy is they removed the requirement for annual training. We used to have annual training, we still have annual training through CPI. Visit with the administrative team about that. We're looking at doing that differently now, because right now we require CPI training for all staff. Going into next year, and I think out of that, the only people who really even utilize those procedures probably are administrators in the event that we have to. And so we're going to back off how we do that and identify key people in each building who may be involved in seclusion and restraint, and do that CPI training as opposed to doing 100% of our staff, because 100% of our staff and 95% of them will never use it. You know, so we're probably going to back off of that. But the annual requirement's no longer there, and so they took that away as well. The other piece that we need to work on, you can't see this, but MSBA provided a form that will be used for documentation purposes, because we must do a better job documenting issues of restraint, you know, and because there are occasions at all levels where there is a need to restrain a student because they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to hurt somebody else. And we need to be able to have a methodology to document that, and MSBA is helping us with that. And so hopefully we'll do a better job of making sure that we document those situations. So, if you have any questions on that one. The next one is student health services and requirements. And this is one, again, I had Janet look it over. She had a lot of questions about it, but she didn't really suggest any changes to this one in particular. It really, and interestingly, this came out of conversations with school nurses across the state. So these were changes that they suggested be placed in the policy based on their experiences and what they believe to be essential. You know, access to school health records, information that provided to parents by the Center for Disease Control. I think even information about health insurance, if they need health insurance. And so I think those are all things, again, Janet was fine with everything that was in that, and with respect to what she does with her position, so.
I just had one quick question.
On that one?
Mm-hmm. Do we have a SHAC, School Health Advisory Council?
Interestingly, I do not think we do. All right, I talked to Janet about that, and she said we did it one time, years ago. And so I'm not sure what happened to that. I'm gonna have to look at some of the history in here. Do you all remember having a Student Health Advisory Council, Marty?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you remember having one recently? Because Janet didn't either. And so I think somehow along the way it went away. And it may be something that we come back to and kind of re-implement and put it back in again. Because I think we have it there, we need to have it.
And it says board appointed.
Right.
So, do you want the board to
Counselor
do that?
and
Or do you
board
want,
appointed members of the community.
or do you want to scratch that and pick somebody else to pick them?
Administrator appointed. I mean, I don't necessarily think it has to be the board, personally. But,
Why would MSBA put in board appointed?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I wouldn't scratch that one without asking that question for sure. It sounds to me like you can make recommendations and bring them to the board, and we acknowledge that those are the ones we want,
Well,
right?
but I can see why, maybe. Because in a small community, I see these people probably being a doctor, or two, or three. And there could be potential conflicts of interest within a community based on who's on there and who's not. So maybe it's something that the board needs to take into account as representatives of the community about who they put on there, whether this doctor versus this doctor, whatever. Either way, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, if we want to keep it there, just keep it there. And when we put it back together, I'll just bring those recommendations to the board. So. All right. Any questions on that?
Yeah, so meaning you are going to ask the
Yeah, I
MSBA
think we
why
need-
they said board
I will
appointed?
do that. First things first, yeah, I'll do that, but first things first, I think we need to go back and start one. If we haven't had one, for whatever reason, it went away, and it's in the policy, then we need to have it.
Or we just scratch that whole part?
Yeah, but
I mean, is it state law that we have to have an SHAC?
I don't know if it's state law or not. It says the district nursing has oversight and will work with the School Health Advisory Council. Whether it's state law, I don't know.
Because if it's not state law, then that's just one more,
Well, I think what happened on
Thing the
that to
nurses have to
be,
do.
yeah, I think, exactly, I think, kind of getting into the gist of the issue, I think. I think when we had changing personnel, that went away.
okay.
I think that's kind of what happened. But I also think we need to go back and bring it back, because I think there's some value to having input from the health community as far as what we're offering to students. So,
And that may be true, but let's find out what their role is, because if they're gonna have meetings, records, and votes that adhere to the requirements of the Missouri Sunshine Law, then there's exposure there. So, let's find out who they are and why they are.
so that being the case, do you want to put that one on hold until we figure that out?
That probably
would be best.
be best,
You
right?
might log that one and pull that one off, and then I'll do some research on that, bring that back to the board.
JHC.
That's JHC. Okay. Anything else under that one? Okay, the next item is probably the one that has garnered the most conversation. That has to do with administration of medications to students. And this specifically was modified to address the medical marijuana issue that we have, that was approved by the state legislature in the last session. And essentially, if you read through the policy, it doesn't change the fact that marijuana, medical marijuana or otherwise, is still forbidden on school grounds, period. It's a violation of federal law to have that. Now, they make a distinction with the cannabis oil, the CBD oil. It's in such small doses that it's no longer being regulated by FDHA. So it's basically allowed, from what I understand. So that is not a violation of school policy, and that's even legal, if you, as long as you have a script. I mean, you have to have something from the doctor saying, because it's treated like any other prescription, so.
Right, but if you bring in your CBD gummies, that's illegal because
Yes.
it's the federal government says it's illegal.
Bring in your what?
Your
Gummies.
Your
Gummies.
CBD gummies,
Okay.
CBD.
or
Or
Whatever.
the oil that you buy.
Or the oil you buy.
over the
Right.
counter somewhere.
And even with that, it still needs to go through the school nurse's office before you administer any of that to kids.
because the only CBD, how I understood the policy, that needs to be on this school property is a prescription written by your doctor that's FDA
Correct,
approved.
correct.
So if you go to
And
your
I don't-
CBD store, none of that stuff can go
And
on
I don't think
campus.
doctors will give CBD gummies.
Right, do what now?
I don't think doctors will give CBD gummies.
No.
Right, that's
Right.
gonna come from your
So
CBD
You will
store.
actually have to have a script from the doctor
Correct.
to allow that to occur
Right.
on school grounds.
And that's only if you have seizures.
Correct, for epilepsy,
Right.
correct. And there's really only one in the
That's it.
summer, there's only one that's even been identified
Right.
as an acceptable, CBD drug. I can't remember whether it starts with an E, it's a long name, but there's only one that they even allow right now. And so it's gonna be relatively easy to regulate. I think, obviously, for obvious reasons, I think our school nursing staff has concerns about having to do that. But it's the state law, it is what it is. But it doesn't change the fact that medical marijuana or marijuana from other sources is still illegal. Off-the-street marijuana is still illegal. You can't bring it on school grounds, so. And then there were a couple changes that she also suggested. I'm sorry. There was one on page 3, says parent guardians are encouraged, and she would rather it say required, to submit any relevant information regarding the medications that their student needs, and not just encouraged, but, you're required to let us know if there's relevant information or relevant.
Okay, so are the items in red her?
Those are her changes.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, because I have a question about one of those also.
Okay.
Do you want to continue with
Yeah,
page
sure.
3? or
Well,
you
there's
done
another
with
one, there's another one on, which,
that? Page 5,
I'm on page 7, page 5.
back up.
Okay, written permission. The district may administer over-the-counter medication to a student if the district has received, and she would like to say that written permission to do so
Right.
from the parent guardian.
And I support that 100%, but I don't understand why we would require written permission for over-the-counter medications, and then the next paragraph, we don't require written permission for the prescriptions. I would like to
No,
insert.
then we can insert written.
I would like
as
to
well.
insert written
Sure.
between received and permission
Sure.
in that paragraph
Yeah,
as
we can
well.
do that. That's an
Just so
oversight.
that it's consistent.
Yeah, that's an oversight, that makes sense, so. Let me make sure. Let's see.
It's gonna make that real difficult for me to call a motion on that one.
You keeping track?
We only have one change and then we're just getting
Yeah, I
on
think
the
that so far it's
policy.
been pretty easy.
Okay, I've got that. So I'll make sure we get that change. Okay? All right, anything else under that one? Then there's another one in red on page 7, and it's for emergency medication, and it said all, instead of all, it said, when it said the primary, not all, because we don't have those in the
Every building.
the ISS room and the sped room and all that. So just to make sure it's middle school, elementary, high school.
Clarification.
So that's why we put that in there. Anything else under that one?
Not for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last one is KK, and KK basically states, there's really several things in there. One has to do with parents who have shared custody of kids. And it's a problem at times, because one parent may have the child one week and the next parent may have the child the next week, and so they're both delivering kids to school, and neither one kind of like, if they're not on the same page, then they're fighting all the time about, you know, you're not doing it right, you're not dressing my kid right, I don't want to come up and make sure my kid's dressed right, or I want to come up and eat lunch with my kid, well, I don't want you to eat lunch with the kid, because it's all this kind of stuff. The point of the policy is to state that it's not the school's responsibility to in any way adjudicate custodial issues. If you got that issue, you need to solve it in court. What we can do is we can certainly keep parents from seeing their kids if they're causing disruption to education. If them being there is disrupting the educational process, you can basically say you're not, come back and we'll figure it out. But it also states that it's not our job to figure out your custody issue. You figure that out, and once we got legal documentation, then we'll proceed that way. And so that's the purpose of that. That's one piece of that. The other piece of that has to do with not allowing outside entities for behavioral health care to come in to work with students at school. Now, if they're contracted with the school district, such as OMC, that's fine. But we have had requests from parents who would like to have their psychologists come in and visit with their child at the school. This policy would not allow that. This policy would say, you can do that, but come and pick up your child, go to a different location, and you can do that, but you don't deliver that service. If it's not contracted by the school, don't deliver that service on school time or at the school, which I think is a good thing. So, any questions about KK?
Yes, KK, page 3, paragraph 5,
Okay.
the last sentence.
The district discourages parents, guardians, grandparents, and other relatives from visiting students during school hours or school activities.
That doesn't seem very friendly.
That does seem a bit harsh, doesn't it?
I mean, does that include ball games? Seems a little tough.
During school hours.
I'm not sure I'm all on board with that line.
School activities.
I get the whole parent guardian thing, I'm right there, I'm let our administrators make those decisions,
Yeah.
but let's not send that message.
Yeah, and I think what happened on that one, I agree, but I mean, when you take it out of context, that's exactly how that sounds. I think it follows from what was preceding, especially when they talk about, you know, we're not gonna mess with mediating visitation rights and all this other kind of stuff, so from that standpoint, we really discourage that. But
And it goes on
But
in
if
the
you
next
look at it, I
paragraph,
know,
say.
but if you look at it that way, it almost, it's like a.
It's the wrong thing to say.
Please don't come to.
It doesn't add anything to that paragraph, quite
Not
frankly.
necessarily.
And the next paragraph gives us all the authority we need to do the right thing.
That's right. And in fact, we have had to this year.
I'm sure we have,
This year's
and we'll have to again.
Right, as far as parents eating
Case by
lunches
case,
with kids,
sure.
that's a problem.
Right.
You know,
However,
so you would, and I think that's fine, because I tend to agree, I mean,
that's the wrong.
how's the rest of the board feel about that? Just
No,
scratching
I
that
agree.
last sentence. Okay.
Most people go to the last.
And when I read it,
What's that? Yeah.
and when I read it, I just pushed it up with the other sentence.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you take it in and of itself, it sounds stupid. I mean, it sounds like, well, I guess we don't
Right.
want our parents here.
Right.
But I think they meant for it to extend from custody disputes.
Like, I had to read it twice, I thought, oh, but, you know,
But I get what you're saying. I mean,
Just
it does
matters.
sound pretty, like, very non-inviting. As a matter of fact, it's non-inviting.
Yeah,
It's just don't come.
It's
you know,
just superfluous, it doesn't
I
make
get
it
it.
either.
I get it. So, is everybody okay with that? Delete that one, strike that one? Okay. Do you get that on your list?
Got that motion made, Tony?
I'm not making a motion.
Okay, we'll delete.
You'll let him make it.
Make it amended,
Yeah.
and then we can vote on the amendment with a motion.
Ooh, that'd be fun. Let's do that.
And that's all the policies. Anything else, any other questions or anything?
Yeah, I got one, and it's a technical question. So I'm trying to follow through on my Chromebook here, and I'm only getting the summary. Am I doing something wrong?
Yes, they'll send a whole separate email with all of the full
But
policies.
I don't think the full policy's in there. I sent the separate email last week,
Right.
but I didn't put it in that,
In
because that's just the
this.
board packet.
Okay.
And in the board packet, you just have the summaries.
And in the board packet, I just have the summary.
Correct.
That is correct.
But when I did that one, that board
So
packet.
what you have here, though, is what we
the board-
really need if we're gonna talk about some of the policies.
Well, yeah,
Somebody has to have
except
it.
I emailed them to you ahead of time.
No, I have them, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I have
Right.
everything. I just, it's not there.
I can put it there next time.
Yeah, so that,
We can get it there.
because I kept looking for it, I'm,
There you go.
where is
It's on
it?
your email.
Well, it's on the email, it's on the email that I sent to you last Wednesday at 4:58 PM, all right? Look it up.
Okay, so
It's
it's
there.
on another email?
Yes, I sent it as a separate email. I did.
Now we have to open it up.
We could put the entire policy in the board packet.
No,
Do that. We could do that, and it would be a board packet about like that, but that's okay, we can do that.
No, just do it electronically.
Yeah, how about that? Tony said that.
do it electronically.
But in the future, though, knowing that, that's a good point, because for you Chromebook users, you know, we can make sure that the electronic version has the entire policy in it. So we can do that.
And that's non-Chromebook users.
And
can ask
you,
questions.
I wasn't trying, I was not making any opinionated comment at all. I was just referring to the Chromebook users and the non-Chromebook users, so that's,
No characterization there.
do with it what you want.
All right.
All right, that's everything.
All right, item D, lighting and HVAC report. That's what you guys have been waiting for.
That's
For an hour.
Had to sit through policy to get here, but you earned it.
Well, I learned a lot tonight, that's for sure. So we are an hour into the agenda. I want you to know, you don't need my permission, but you totally would have my blessing if you want to stand up and stretch, because I know how that is to sit for a while. I'm Ryan Evans again. I came with Dr. Wheeler, my colleague. One of the things we wanted to come discuss with you tonight, and we really truly want this to be a discussion, is about what you do for your next steps with regards to the energy projects that we've already put in front of you. Primarily, we started with this lighting thing, and I'll start real quick just by saying that I learned something new today. I started the day at a charter school, a public charter school in Kansas City that we were doing an investment grade audit for. And the facilities director there had shared with me something I hadn't heard before, that the number one reason that these public charter schools fail is because they get upside down with their facilities. So I know that's an easy thing to overlook in your school. You got a lot of stuff on your agenda that you deal with. Mike, I know you, every day, this is what you live and breathe. But this is something that's important. Your situation is going to be different than a charter school. I understand that too, but it's still something we need to look at. So what we don't want to do today is have another presentation. We don't think that's probably the best use of your time. So we're really here to discuss, you know, what you might want to do next. And we've outlined some different things that we want to take a look at. For one, you've got a lighting project. That's pretty safe, right? The economics on that are particularly strong. So then the question really moves to, do you want to use the savings from the lighting project and be able to legally move funds from your Fund 1 over into your Fund 4 to be able to do more stuff? And I didn't notice it until about 10 minutes ago, but somebody's written up some of this stuff up here on the, and maybe that's something you've discussed
That's our
already.
last board meeting.
Okay, great. So it's still up from the last board meeting. So we did this, and really I should give the credit to Mike, because he went through and did an inventory of all your HVAC. And what we found is that you've got, when you look at HVAC, there's some telltale things that we're looking for. So that's my background. So I'm an HVAC engineer. I spent years designing HVAC for schools and hospitals and other facilities. There are two types of life that we look at for HVAC. One is called serviceable life, and one is called expected life. Serviceable life is about 15 years for most unitary equipment, pretty much what you have at your school right now. What that means is that unit might last longer, but it starts to become more expensive to maintain, to the point where it might be good to start looking at replacing that equipment. Expected life then is truly the end of life for the unit. So 15 years is a serviceable life on unitary equipment. Generally speaking, expected life for unitary equipment is going to be between 17 and 22 years, depending on how that equipment is maintained. So we usually say around 20 years. So we divided that into those categories, and what we found is about 20% of the school's HVAC was at about 20 to 25 years. So this is things that we expect to fail over the course of the next several years. And then you have another group of stuff that's not maybe to its expected life yet, but it's certainly at past its serviceable life, and that's another set of equipment that you should also consider. And then we identified in a memo that we gave to you about these priority 2B projects, which is really looking at the middle school. So this is something that you came to us and said, hey, this is a problem for us. Mr. Bailey has said, you know, we find this system hard to maintain. It's not great for the classroom environment. We have trouble controlling it. It can be noisy. And the boilers are really getting to be quite outdated, so we need to do something to look at that. So then the question really comes back to you. We've shared with you in the feasibility study, I see some of you have that with you and it's printed out. I know that Mr. Hall had shared this with you. In the back of this lighting audit, we shared with you some examples about how this works. If there's questions about that, again, we want to handle that. But really effectively what we're doing is we're taking the savings of the lighting over the course of its life and using it to be able to afford other things. You have a choice. You can use the lighting savings, and if you're disciplined enough after spending 2.5 to 3 years waiting for it to pay back, to start to set that money aside. But by the time you save up enough money to be able to afford some of that HVAC that we've talked about, you're probably about 10 years out. So what you might need instead is to get into something like what we did where I started this with the charter school this morning, is doing an investment grade audit, which identifies your roadmap of when is the best time to start to replace that equipment. So I want to take a pause here for a second to make sure that that all makes sense and what that process looks like.
Yeah.
And kind of why you would do it.
If I could, Ryan, part of the reason that I asked Ryan to come back this evening is because after our conversation last month, and I visited with Ryan, the board showed interest in possibly wanting to do something with the middle school in terms of a redesign. And that was the gist that I had from the board. And I visited with Ryan about that, which I think is fine. You're leveraging your dollars on the lighting side. And I think we all agree that at the very least, doing the lighting upgrade is somewhat of a no-brainer. It's something we probably need to do. But are we going to leverage that to try to do something else beyond that? So when I mentioned kind of the redesign at the middle school, that all of a sudden turned into a really big deal. And the reason for that is because that will trigger the need for an investment grade audit to do that, which I think is fine, because an investment grade audit will give us information long-term as a roadmap in terms of where we need to go with our HVAC systems and our lighting systems and so forth. The kicker on that is the cost, and we can toss this around, and I know it may not be, we should, but it could be about $50,000 for an investment grade audit. Now, should the board decide to do nothing, decide at this point, okay, let's move forward, let's get an investment grade audit, see what we're looking at. Let's look dollars and cents and see how much money it can save the district. And is it then prudent for the board to move forward? But you need that information to make that decision. And to get that information is going to cost in the neighborhood of $50,000. If at the end of the day, you say, okay, let's do that, and then you decide to do nothing. I mean, nothing. We just don't want to do lighting, we don't do anything. Well, we still stand the cost of that $50,000 audit, all right? Because at this point in time, if we go down that road, then we've got some skin in the game at that point in time. If we decide to go ahead and do it because we need to determine what type of system is most prudent, most efficient for the middle school, that's what we decide to do, maybe even roll in some upgrades, some of the HVAC units that are becoming close to end of life, then that will help us, and then if we decide to do that and just do the lighting, but we don't want to do the other stuff now. We just decided to do investment grade audit, fine, that's great. We're not going to do the HVAC or redesign the middle school, we're just going to fix the lighting. Then we can defer the cost of that and roll it into the cost of the lighting, which will extend it not by very much. I think the payback on the lighting itself is 2.7 years. So that might move it to maybe 3 years, maybe a little under 3 years, something to that effect. Right. So we're not going to see the cost of the investment grade audit. It's going to be rolled into the lighting, which will help us in that. So it's not going to cost any more money. They don't have a valuable tool. What's that?
It's a deferred cost,
right,
is what you're saying. So you don't have to write a check for it, it just becomes
correct,
part of the project, paid for through savings.
So it really comes down, the reason why it's important is it had to come back to the board at this point, because if we're going to move forward, then we need some direction. Are we just going to do the lighting and forget the rest of it? And if that's the the way, that's all.
And that's okay.
That's a possibility, yeah, and that will give us the greatest amount of savings. However, if we want to try to tackle one or several of these other comprehensive projects, then you use the lighting to leverage that, and if we move forward without doing that, you know, like we shared before, you only get one bite out of the apple. You know, once we do the lighting, it's done, and there is no opportunity to leverage those dollars in the future, all right? So that's kind of the issue before the board this evening, is where are we headed and what do we want to do in terms of the energy performance contract, and do we just want to do the lighting? Do we want to try to get an investment grade audit in here and see what we can do the biggest bang for the buck, knowing that when you do that, you're committing to the cost of that audit?
Well, an investment grade, just to be clear too, like when we do lighting audits, the reason we do those at risk is because it's really simple to come in and count fixtures, lamps. It's what the information is that's in here. The math is really straightforward. HVAC, especially when you're talking about a redesign of a new system in a building, not a one-to-one change out, that, and you've got weather effects, you know, energy models that have to take place, those costs start to scale up. So it's a little bit to help protect us for our time. What you get out of it, even if you decide not to do anything, is a roadmap that says, these are the things that you should do first, based on these factors, end of life, maybe it's too close to the end of its life, or maybe it has the best economic benefits, whatever. These are the things you should do next, these are the things you should push off into a tertiary category. So it's going to help you with your master planning around your systems. You can't operate a school without lights, you really have a pretty hard time operating it without HVAC too. Windows, roofs, anything else we might look at is going to identify all those opportunities and tell you, when you compare these mutually exclusive options side by side, these are the ones you should start with, these are the ones you should do next, and that's what that is about.
Brian, let me ask you a question. How long would an investment grade audit take to perform?
It generally takes us about 90 days.
90 days.
To fully quantify it.
And if we were to move forward on the lighting project, when would we undertake that project?
You can do the lighting, if you really like the lighting project, you can do that lighting about any time that you want. You can do it ahead, you can even do it within that 90 days. It needs to be split out as a separate project, but there's a way to be able to do that, as we've talked to the investment bankers.
It's not attached to the audit. That audit's independent of that.
Yes and no. We're still, you think of it as two separate projects. You got lighting and you got everything else that you're looking at that you might do with the savings. The savings from project one can be used to pay for project two in that scenario.
So we could go ahead with the lighting project, or we could wait with the lighting project until an investment grade audit was completed, if we wanted to do that.
The cleanest way to do it is to wait and get it all done at once, but you're leaving savings on the table if you do that. So if you told us we really want to get the lighting done over a winter break, because we know the HVAC is going to be summer projects and we don't want to wait 6 months to have that lighting, then we would look at splitting it up.
Clarification, one question that came up to me from a patron who was listening to this conversation. For the lighting, because we would be using a third party such as yourselves who's going to come in and do the work on that, but is it necessary to do? I mean, from a very simplistic approach, it was basically said, if you're going to change from your T4s and T8s, just go in and put a LED light and move on. You know, just go ahead and change a bulb, and you're good.
You can do that.
Clarify that for me, would you?
Okay, yeah, thanks. So there is a way to be able to do plug and play with LEDs. We don't recommend it because it doesn't take the ballast out of the system. Did this light go off? Is that what you were pointing out earlier? Did that just?
We were just noticing that we've got a light out. We're here to talk about this.
This light is out. Chances are, when you see a bulb go out, it's usually the tube itself. When you see a whole light fixture go out, like the one that's above your head right here, it's probably a ballast. The plug and play technology, it's LED. It's going to give you a better quality of light. It's also going to experience extra losses because it's got to run through that ballast first, so it's not as efficient as what it would be if it was a true LED solution. And if the ballast goes out, you're still going to end up with this problem right here. That's why we don't recommend it. Those are called Type A lamps. There's also Type B and Type C. Type B is what we most commonly see. That's where you have to get the ballast out of the system. It's fully converted, so the next time you replace your LEDs, which is going to be, you know, on 50,000 hours, when you do the math on it, it's probably going to be 15 or 20 years down the road, depending on how long you burn them. Then it truly will be plug and play at that point, but you don't necessarily want to do that. Now, I will say, one of the advantages for using us is that we've cut out 3 layers of middlemen. There's no distributor, there's no wholesaler, there's no contractor markup in our pricing. So generally speaking, if you look at apples to apples comparison of LED product, you're going to get our lights, the materials and the installation done for what most people can just buy the materials for. So that's another reason you would do that. And we're gonna get in and get out. We generally would like to get those projects done within, 2 to 3 weeks, so you start to experience those savings right away. You can have your own folks do it. Some people choose to do that, but they're going to take months and months to get everything converted over. They're gonna get pulled away for other priorities, and you're leaving savings on the table doing that. So generally, we find if you really sit down and pencil it out, you're gonna be money ahead by having somebody like us do that.
Okay, so I have one fast question, and it's gonna be a stupid question, but I'm not sure I'm sold on, LED lighting. And the reason is because at my house, I went out and bought expensive LED bulbs, and I change them because I am that person. I like write the date down, and they last 2 years,
Yep.
maybe 3.
Yep.
So now I'm just back to just the expensive light bulbs because I'm just over LED.
Yep.
I think it's all hype.
Yep.
How are your bulbs gonna be more awesome
It's
than that?
completely, the residential quality of a residential product is something far less than what you're
Okay.
getting from a commercial grade product. These are rated at 50,000 hours, all right? Schools generally will burn them for 2,500 hours roughly per year, it depends. Gymnasiums, hallway classrooms, they're gonna be around that, so that's 20 years if you do the math. They are warranted for 7 years. So you're covered by warranty for those entire 7 years, but they're probably gonna last double or triple that. It's a completely different technology. I have residential quality LEDs in my house. I also have commercial quality LEDs because I can get access to those.
Right.
The commercial quality LEDs, the light it's pure, it's the same always. The residential ones, like you, have had problems, like one day I'll flip on the switch and it'll be a little green, or it'll be a little red.
Or it's not dark.
That's the Kelvin.
Or it's not it at all.
Or that's
The
right.
Kelvin's right.
It's the driver. You've got
Okay.
a really bad chip, basically. It's got bad brains.
Okay.
Maybe the diodes are okay. They may not be that great either, but it's usually the driver in that. It's just a bad technology. This is really cheap.
Okay, so your all's bulbs, like if I go write the date on one, it's gonna last at least 7 years under warranty.
Well, if it doesn't, they're gonna give you a new one.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Okay.
And Ryan's gonna bring it and install it in your house.
Yeah. It may be a guy named
That's how
Ryan.
good it's gonna
It may
be.
be a guy named Ryan.
Are you really gonna go around and write a date on all the balls?
Every bulb in the school.
Not every
You're gonna
bulb,
do
no,
that.
I'm gonna let
see
you,
that.
but I mean,
She's
I'm
gonna
just,
sample.
okay.
And when they last so long, I hope we get a good testimony out of you. Like, I wrote the date down and they lasted that long.
That's right.
Well, the
I
other
appreciate the
issue-
question, though.
But the other
Yeah.
issue would be on the installation, though, is if we didn't have a third party do it, basically I said, Mike, get on it. You got all these bulbs, change them out. A year or two later, we might be there, right? I mean, it just takes time to do that. It probably takes time,
Actually,
but
that's
the point
fine.
being is
Maybe a
that
couple years.
we're losing savings. The longer it takes to do this, we're losing savings.
Yeah.
Is that a fair
And
statement?
the payback's
More importantly, we lose the opportunity to leverage any of the
The other
savings
stuff.
into another fund. That's where we really have.
That's the whole bite of the apple thing. Yeah, you're gonna get one bite out of the apple. How big of a bite do you want to take? That's really the question. So yeah, you got 2,700 and plus lamps, and the annual savings when you add these numbers together, 50,000. So you're really looking at about $4,000 a month.
2,700 lamps or fixtures.
Fixtures, excuse me, fixtures. And these lamps might have 3, 2, 4, it just depends. So yeah, there's even more lamps in that too. We've got that kind of down to a science. To change out one of these troffers, it's 17 minutes for us. It's gonna take
22 for us.
at least, at least.
No
That'd be good.
pressure.
If you could do it in 22, I'd like to see it. That's pretty good.
Snip, snip.
Actually, by the end of the project, you could probably do it in 17 minutes too, if you can keep a guy on.
Snip,
it.
snip, 2,700 times.
Yeah.
On top of all that, the quality that we're gonna get locally isn't gonna be what we'll get from them either.
Well, that may be true. The thing that you have to realize about LEDs is that there are different levels of quality, and that's why it's really hard sometimes to get apples to apples. Somebody can always beat you on price, it's just not gonna have the quality necessarily that you're gonna wanna get out of it. If you can find somebody who has an equivalent quality to what our lamps are, our cost advantages are usually gonna shine in that scenario. And that really relates back to the question about the stuff that you have in your house.
Right, so just to be clear here, if we go the cheap route and we do it in-house, we're still not gonna see the full savings because we have not changed out the ballast.
That's not true. That's not true.
How do you mean? The ballast you can get up
You
to,
could take the ballast out with 2 screws. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, you've got to use the right kind of light. But you can take the ballast out, we can do that. What you can't do is leverage the money afterward. Can we do it more cheaply? I'm not sure. Maybe.
Why can you not leverage the money?
Well, because we would
Because
have
it
to, we would
takes
have to
longer.
retain those savings and put it in a sock drawer somewhere for 5 years before we'd have enough money to do anything with it.
That's correct.
Where here, we can borrow against our future savings and spend the money now, and it repays itself through those light savings.
Yeah, and I picked up between the two of you, the Type A lamps are what they call ballast compatible, those are
Okay.
plug and play. Type B is where you take the ballast out
You
of the
can cut it
system.
out, positive, negative.
Yeah, and you can do it either way. If
But
you don't have a
you're gonna
good,
take them out.
yeah, if you don't have an electrician, you really don't want somebody up there messing with line voltage, taking a ballast out. Now, you've got people who are capable of doing that, so you can get to Type B. But some folks don't have that, and so they do Type A. In that situation, you would get up to 30% losses through that ballast. So that is a real
So
thing.
that's what I was,
That's
okay.
a real way to do it.
That's a real
Okay.
thing. Yeah, it's an option, right, for
Right.
different LED. We don't do Type A, by the way. We don't even do it.
So Type A wouldn't help us with that.
Well, the beautiful thing about going to a Type B solution is that, and none of us will be doing what we're doing right now, 15 or 20 years from now, when they go to replace these lights again. But the next time they do that, it truly will be plug and play. The ballast is already out of the system, they're gonna pull the lamp out that's in there, and they're gonna slide a new one back up in its place. And you're ready to go.
Are you gonna be replacing the tombstones?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, and that's another great question. We don't get asked that very often, but when these LEDs really became prevalent about 5 years ago, we had to do that a lot.
Do you clarify what that?
Tombstones are what, yeah, thank you. When these things right here are sliding up, and where they slide up into this fixture at, and they actually connect with the fixture, or where those pins on the end of that are clipping into it, that's called a tombstone. And those tombstones, originally, the lamps weren't really made to be compatible with those tombstones, and so a lot of times we found that we had to replace them. Now, everything is just super compatible, so it just makes that whole process easier. It's also why we've seen the economics of LED fall from 8-year, 7-year payback, all the way down to what you have, which is, 2 to 3 year payback, for those types of reasons. And they've just gotten to be more efficient. What we were doing 3 or 4 years ago was an 18-watt solution, we're doing a 10-watt solution today, so it's just gotten to be that much better.
So the Type B is just, we can use them in any of the fixtures we've got.
As long as you get the ballast out.
With the-
Yep, they
Take
need
the ballast
voltage.
out and you just rear out the
So the
wires.
tombstones are not a problem then.
That's correct, yep.
And the other thing that we wouldn't get if we just did it internal on the lighting is the investment grade audit is necessary if we want to do anything else. Because we need outside consultants to come in and basically tell us, to quantify the savings, especially since you're going to borrow against the savings that you have on the lighting. So that's why we need that investment grade audit to be done, if we want to pursue something beyond the lighting.
Right.
And now,
Okay.
the question that I don't, and what's that?
So that we can borrow the money.
Yeah, exactly. So help me understand that, because I don't think, the board doesn't need to decide this evening what project we're going to do. The only thing the board needs to decide is, are we going to do the lighting, and are we going to do the investment grade audit? Because then the investment grade audit will give us a roadmap on what would be the best economical project for us to do,
Right,
correct?
I'd like you to have that, that's your choice, but if I'm in
I
Mike's
mean, they don't have to
shoes,
say,
I-
okay, tonight we're going to do the middle school, we're going to redesign the middle. They don't have to decide that tonight. That'll be part of the investment grade audit, correct? Or-
No, that's correct, yeah,
Okay.
you don't have to decide that tonight.
We don't even have to decide on the lighting tonight technically, we just have to
Well,
decide.
no,
on
you
all
don't have to, except as long as everyone knows that if you decide to do it.
If we don't do it, then
Don't
we
do
pay
anything,
50
we're
grand.
going we're gonna hold for the law.
And it may not be 50 grand, but it's gonna be a 5-digit number, but it may be something a little less.
So what all is included? I mean, what is everything that you're auditing? You're gonna audit all HVAC throughout all the buildings?
We can limit it to what you want it to be, but generally when we do this for schools, we look at roofs, we look at lights, we look at HVAC, we look at windows, we look at plumbing fixtures, anything that can have a cost savings, an energy or water savings, a utility cost savings associated with it, we will look at and quantify.
That's part of the audit.
Part of the audit. It's comprehensive, is generally how we do that. Now, we've had some where we say, well, we only want to look at HVAC, and we can do that too, and it makes it a little cheaper if you do that. And that might be something you want to consider doing here, it's like, let's just look at the HVAC, and we'll
Sure.
windows and roofs separately, but generally that's how we do it.
Okay, so one more question, and then I'm and then I might be done. So this was.
She's not.
No, so.
This is what we want, by the way. We were hoping for the conversation, so keep them coming.
Okay, so back on September 7th, so this is probably last month's meeting, so I was not here. I'm just trying to do simple math here. You all said that there was 100 tons of unitary direct exchange air conditioners.
Yep.
Then down here in priority 1, which is also written up on the board, is 80 tons, and priority 2 is 52.5 tons. Okay. When I take 80 plus 50, that doesn't equal 400 tons. Is that just,
400
am I
tons.
just not
That's just the
thinking?
stuff that's that old.
This is, this
That's
falls
not
into that
counting good
category.
stuff.
You've got,
There's some stuff that's not that old. Not everything's 15
you've got
years old.
260 tons roughly that is not as old, right? That's less than 15 years.
Okay,
Yeah. And I will,
so
there's some,
really?
you don't want to replace
It's not
all.
all old?
So we,
Okay, okay.
keep talking, if you got,
No, so, that's how that math goes, is 260 tons is not old, less than, 15
Yeah.
years.
yeah, it's less than 15 years old.
Okay.
That's correct. So one thing I will tell you, because I think and you weren't, this kind of led me to this, but you don't want to replace 100% of your HVAC all at once. And the reason is because 15 years from now, you're going to be replacing 100% of your HVAC again.
And we're not gonna have lights to pay for it.
Yeah, that's true, right? Like, if they're 10 watts now, you're not gonna get, like, these are 40 watts above our head right now, you're not gonna get another 30 watts out of 10, you know what I mean? So, that's true, we have to look for another bell cow, hopefully there is one, if not, there's not. But you don't wanna, 15 years from now, have to replace 400 tons of HVAC. That's an incredibly hard thing to do. Most schools would look to be trying to issue a bond, your assessed valuation times whatever it is, 15%, you may not even be able to get there.
Okay.
And so then you're up in a deferred maintenance thing again. So what we recommend is that every 5 years to get about a third of them. And that just happens to be how these numbers fall out. It's not something you have to do. This doesn't include these projects down here too. So the investment grade audit, we'll see how much we can get out of Fund 1 that we can shift to Fund 4. So we can see if we can capture this and then how much of this we can also capture. And starting with these projects over these, obviously, because these are older than these.
Right.
And when we do this, now this is just based on their age. And we'll actually have an HVAC auditor come out here in the investment grade audit, and they will grade out the equipment. They're gonna go look at it, and they can tell by looking inside of it, based on the fans, the pulleys, the coils. Approximately, they kind of give it different categories. ASHRAE is the governing society for this, and it's an acronym that stands for a bunch of stuff, but it tells you, based on this, it's got this many years left, and it's a pretty good, it's an educated guess on how much life is left in the equipment. So even within these categories, we may find some stuff that's in priority 1 that is gonna last longer than some of the other priority 1 stuff might die right away. And in priority 2, we may have some stuff move up and down based on that. So we'll rate all that equipment. It'll be more granular than what you see up there.
Right, okay.
But this audit is only, this is separate from the lights. What,
Yes.
and you said just a minute ago, we need to decide tonight whether we're gonna do this $50,000 audit?
Yes. And I know that, basically, yeah. You have to decide, we can put it off, you can wait another 2 or 3 months. But the longer we wait, we're losing the savings on the lighting. We've been talking about this for 3 months already. So at some point in time, we kind of need to decide, what are we going to do? Are we going to continue to talk about it? Or do you want to move forward here? Or do you just want to do the lighting? I think everyone here agrees that the lighting needs to happen.
Yeah, I kind of thought we already decided that.
So the question then, which is why we're back here then, do we want to do the audit and try to take a bigger bite out of this apple?
He's
Or
got
not?
something to say down here.
If I was sitting in his seat and yours, I would want to do the investment grade audit as quickly as possible because you'll have that data to use for next year's budget. You'll know what things you need to do with maintenance next year. Not only for next year, you're going to be able to know what you're going to do the next year and the next year and the next year because it's going to be prioritized according to what the audit tells you.
Based upon what I've heard thus far in 3 months, my recommendation to the board is that we do the lighting and we get the comprehensive, the investment grade audit done. And then we figure out where we are. That's my recommendation to the board.
So I don't want to complicate it, but can we talk a little bit about procurement? Two. So you're over $50,000, not on the IGA, but on the lighting piece of it. There's a state statute, I mentioned it the last time I was with you, 8.231, that governs these types of projects. And they call it an RFP. It's really essentially an RFQ. You have to select somebody through this process, right? You can't just hire us, as much as we'd love that. You can't just hire us to work with. And so that keeps everything above the table. You would go out and you need to go through that RFQ of sorts, or RFP if you want to call it that. And then you can make that selection based on that. What that allows you to do is that allows you to then get into a situation where you define the projects, the energy projects that are going to pay for themselves, and it becomes negotiated as opposed to low bid, which is better for you, because what you're getting out of it is a guaranteed maximum price and a guaranteed minimum savings that is in excess of that price. Does that make sense?
Works for me.
So if that's the route you want to go for it, then I guess I might offer to you maybe some sample language for the board to consider to post, because you do need to put it out there.
Yeah, and that would be for the investment grade audit as well?
It is for the investment grade audit.
Okay,
That's
for that
basically,
particular piece,
you're
okay.
going through qualifications to select
Sure.
energy engineers that can do your
Okay.
investment grade audit.
I guess I need to find out from the board. I mean, that's my recommendation. And I don't know if we need that in the form of a motion. I think it would be more comforting if we did. That way we know that we're bound to it and we'll do it, you know.
And this is gonna be the complete, he talked a while ago about you could make this a compartmentalized thing where you could just do the HVAC, or you do the windows, the doors, we're talking about the whole thing, and the roofs?
Yeah.
They're gonna do the audit, and then we can
Right.
decide what we're gonna do after.
But the audit includes all those things.
And
Including the roof.
yeah, correct.
What do you mean including the roof?
Yeah, what are we talking about with doing the roof here?
So maybe you don't need a roof.
Okay.
But we would evaluate,
Yeah.
if we worked with Mike and we said, hey, Mike, how about your roofs? Do you have any roofs that are leaking? Do you have any roofs that are scheduled?
We don't
to be
need that.
replaced?
We've been down that road.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought
We've been like about a year of doing that, so we've got like a whole roof maintenance plan, that style roofing out there.
That's great. So
Yeah.
so you don't need it, but we find that some schools do need that.
If it's part of the audit and it doesn't cost us
Well,
extra.
that's my name. Does it cost extra more?
Now, we're
We
gonna
get it
add,
free.
hey, can we
We
see
get it
your roof
free.
maintenance plan?
Yeah.
Will it cheapen up the audit? Will it
Appendix, there you go.
Will it make it 45,000?
I certainly wouldn't mind having a second opinion if it doesn't cost us anything.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. We might be able to make the audit cheaper if we know that we're not gonna evaluate roofs as a part of the
Okay,
project.
that's what I was wondering.
So let's do
And I mean,
that.
is there-
Let's do what you need.
So we start talking about, I mean, this is the first time I've heard anything about windows
Yeah.
is tonight. Is that something that we need to evaluate?
Now,
or
Windows is
I would
another,
say we need to look at windows.
Windows is another area where you can find some
That's a
significant savings.
Huge
You really can.
Well, it's just, and it can be pretty, you might need to replace windows because they're old and drafty. But it could be simply just weatherization type stuff, which is really low hanging fruit. It has high paybacks, and it's really cheap for us to
I
do
think we
something.
definitely need to look at windows.
Gonna make the
I
plastic
agree,
more
we don't
comfortable.
really need to look at roof.
But windows, I think, are big.
Windows are huge. Biggest heat loss there is.
Let me talk to my colleague Parker Higgs and ask him if there's any real true cost savings for pulling the roofs out, because if there isn't anything there, then we might as well just
I'd like to
do
look
that.
at it if it doesn't cost, if it doesn't save us anything, let's look at it. If it does save us something, we've got it already, and we've paid for it.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
How far out can they amortize this dollar-wise? Is it to add things that they see are going to be savings for them? 15 years, isn't that the limit?
That's the max, yeah. So
could
it
you
depends
talk to
on
them
the
about that a
state.
little bit?
Missouri is actually fairly short at 15 years, but you cannot have a term that exceeds 15 years on an energy project. You know, you go south down to Arkansas, it's gonna be 20 years. You go over to Kansas, it's 30 years. 15 years is your max. So everything has to fit and be budget positive within 15 years.
That's okay with me.
But that may also mean that we can do, maybe priority 2B, and we can grab half of priority 1. But if we had 20 years, we could have gotten all of it. So there may be stuff that has to fall out because we can't get to all of it, because they shorten the term.
And the sweet thing is that what we're talking about in your project there is your 10-year expected savings, which is over $500,000. we're expecting 20 years, which is over $1 million. So you come back to that 15-year point and say, okay, but the windows save this much, that can be built into that. And that's what the audit's gonna help tell you. And then you can decide, where do we wanna go? Where do we want, how much do we wanna spend, how much do we wanna set it out, amortize it, you're set to go.
So we talked about earlier that this is guaranteed to, it's got to be by statutory law, it has to be budget neutral, right? And we always say, you're always going to have a little bit more than, so we say it's budget positive, that's where I'm coming up with that term. You may decide, it's an obligation, it's still debt service for you, it's a lease purchase is what we're talking about. It's guaranteed to save more. But you may decide that we want to limit that to 10 years, maybe you don't want to look at 15 years. That's a part of the negotiation that you have with your energy engineer. We're going to provide you information on the different types of projects that are economically viable. And we're going to sit down together and you're going to be like, yeah, I like A and B. I really don't like C. Let's get it out of there. We'll pick up D, but not E. You know, like we'll put stuff out in front of you. We'll really need, Mike, I think we're going to rely on you a lot to help us understand what you see day to day on those projects and sitting in those meetings. But that's a part of the process. That's why I say it's negotiated. We're going to sit down and say, this is what we think we can do and make these as budget positive projects. And then you tell us what you want in, what you want out, what you want the term to be. So you're gonna have a lot of information coming out of the IGA for sure, to be able to make decisions. We'll give some recommendations to you, but it's ultimately your decision.
So if the board decides that they want to go ahead and move with an investment grade audit and the lighting, can we not, I mean, you said earlier it's better if you do it at the same time, can we not go ahead and start the lighting project while that's ongoing or not?
Yeah, you can, and that was the part that we didn't get to on the phone discussion that we had about it. So I talked to your investment banker, LJ, yeah. And what they said is, in order to do the lighting right away, you would have to write it as a separate piece. So you're going to be subjected to additional closing costs, but they thought they could keep that really low. And so and then you can set up a second one. It's not as clean. It's really not as clean, I understand, but it would give you maybe 6 more months of savings.
I also was approached by a local banker about if they could be involved in financing that. Have you ever done that with local banks?
Yeah, absolutely, and you should. If they can give you a better rate than LJ, you should look at that. And you might ask that same question of them. That's how LJ
They were interested in being part of that.
In financing the lighting project or
Yes.
whatever we decide.
Whatever we decide to do.
Well, and what they might do is, because they are local and, you know, they're a part of this community, they may just defer the debt service for the additional 6 months and we can keep it all as one project. And I would hope that they would. LJ said they wouldn't do it, but this is their way, this is their next best thing.
Yeah.
And that's probably what you're gonna get from most of the investment.
So I think we've got 2 local banks, I think, would have an opportunity to at least look at it and give us a proposal.
So we would, right now, what we're gonna do as a part of the investment grade audit, and we'll probably start to work with the banks during that, is to say, hey, give us what you think, give us a ballpark number for what you want us to carry for financing, cost of money, whether that's 3% or 2.75 or 3.95 or whatever that is, and then we'll bake that into the numbers that we're gonna share with you. But I'd have them compete on that and see what you can get for the best price.
So, right now, we need to decide whether we're going to move forward with the investment grade audit. Is that correct? Is that what you want to do, or what?
Well, yeah, and I would.
I don't feel comfortable having a vote on that. We're not under items for action. I don't feel comfortable adding that.
But, if we have direction from the board in terms of how to proceed, then yeah, that could be, you know, we would like to move forward with the lighting project and do the investment grade audit. And then as a matter of formality, I mean, that just kind of gives them the direction to get started. If we need to come back at a subsequent board meeting and actually have a formal motion to do that, that's fine. But I think right now, we just need direction from the board that everyone is on board to do that. That's what we'd like to see happen.
You don't have to do that yet. You don't have to commit yourself to the cost that you might have to bear for the IGA. Maybe, again, it might be deferred and baked into the project if you do the lighting. What I would tell you is that, why don't we get you some sample language for that RFP? And you can commit to that as a board without needing to commit yourself to anything and saying, hey, we're putting this out there we're requesting some quotations and some qualifications for people who might be able to do this. You need to advertise it.
So at this point in time, it's not really time sensitive.
We just need to put the RFP out there.
Right, the board can do this, we can start the investment grade audit in January.
Yep.
You know, we don't have to get it done right now. but we're prolonging the lighting piece
Right.
and losing about $4,000.
Yeah, and you have to decide what you want to, what you're comfortable with for a time frame, but you need to advertise it.
Sure.
I don't think it tells you how many days you have to advertise it. Most will do 3 weeks, some do a little more, some do less, actually. We've seen less.
So I mean, we could do that, and I could have it back, we could have it back for the board at the November board meeting. And then make a decision.
That's a good point.
I would support putting the RFP out there and getting,
I think
That
you
is the
need to
next
do it.
step.
I think you need to do it. I think you,
and then we can come back and decide on the IGA.
yeah, correct. Correct. Again,
How's the board feel about that?
Yeah, I feel good with that. Matt, Adrian,
Yes, yes.
You good, Coach?
Yeah, I would rather wait on the, because once we commit that 50,000, we're in, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I'd rather.
Farrell,
Yes.
Shane.
well, then I will get you some sample language, and you can, it's boilerplate, you can feel free to amend it however you like, and you can use that as, to get it out there to the public. Okay.
And since we'll be advertising for the, what's it called again, the RPH? RFP?
RFP, request for proposal.
Right.
Yep.
Is this also the time that we should be out looking at our, banks here in town and seeing what they can do? Or do you need to wait until after the audit just to see how much we're gonna have to have?
You don't need to do it yet. I think those conversations can happen at any time. If you're serious enough about wanting to do an energy project, again, whether it's with us or somebody else, we hope it's with us, you can start to talk to the bank whenever you're ready, say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, start thinking about what you can get us for terms, so that we're ready to go when it happens.
So can you work with Mr. Hall on the final cost of the audit?
Yeah, sure.
Because
The RFP that you're gonna put out there is, because the projects aren't defined yet, somebody has to come in here and quantify the savings, they gotta do energy modeling and stuff like that, to make sure it can carry the cost of the project. So that's not what this RFP is about. This RFP is about the investment grade audit, that's what you're putting out there. You don't have to include the lighting in it, because it can be rolled in later.
Who will do the audit?
Yeah, who will do the audit, and you're asking for, and you do that as qualification-based selection, so you don't have to take low price. You have to take the best value, right? You're trying to pick the people who you believe can identify the best projects for the school district. A part of that is going to be price. They need to be able to put a price in there and say, yeah, this is our price. We've told you that we think it's gonna be a 5-digit number, less than $50,000 for you. Somebody may come in and beat us by $5,000, they may be $15,000 higher. It just depends, but you have to decide who you believe.
You will
can-
respond, and perhaps others will respond, and then we will choose
Correct.
someone to do the audit.
Yep.
If
Correct.
we decide to go down that path.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be low bidder either, it could
Right,
be
that's-
somebody that we're comfortable with.
Right.
The other thing, though, to me, the natural process would be to do that first, get out there, get some different agencies in front of the board, or different, make a decision. What I would like to find out from you, because I wouldn't mind starting to have that conversation with our local banks, is just a ballpark in terms of, how much are we talking about, over how much period of time, so at least they can start thinking about it. In
Like,
terms of.
you wanna know like what the total value of all the projects
Yeah,
are
if
gonna
we're
be.
gonna ask them to finance an energy performance project for us, what's a
So
ballpark?
the bare minimum, we can give them a range. We'll give them a range, and the bare minimum is gonna be this lighting project.
Right.
And then we'll identify what we
And then
believe.
beyond that, if we decide to do more.
Yep.
You know, I mean,
We'll give
once
them.
you give- so
we'll
I
give
can-
them
That's up to
numbers.
us, though.
Right,
That's up to how much money we
But
spend.
but on the other hand, they may not have the capacity.
But there's a limit to how much we can
That's right.
borrow against this project.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think there's a limit on how much they can finance, that they can give to us. So if it's a $500,000 project, they may not be able to do it. So I think we need to just kind of have an idea for them, so they know kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I could see your maximum value probably will go in excess of $500,000. It could even become a 7-digit number, seriously. And it doesn't mean that you have to pick that. You can be somewhere in between. We'll give them what we think we can tease out in terms of maximum, and then the minimum will be lighting, because it's already identified.
Sure.
And just say, it's gonna be in this range.
It's got to be between the gross savings on the lighting over 15 years, right? That's the maximum we can borrow? And that-
Not necessarily, because other opportunities have.
Oh, if
savings
you can
too.
calculate in window savings and other savings.
Yeah, and they will. And the thing about HVAC is that the payback on HVAC may be 30 years on a 20-year piece of equipment. If you were trying to do it all by itself, you're upside down in the math. But it still has a savings component. It partially carries itself, if you think of it that way. So you couple it with the lighting to get it to stretch even farther. It's really about stretching dollars. That's what we're doing. So there's still additional savings components on some of these other projects, and some of them will even, like solar, for example. You could put photovoltaics up on your roof or in a green field, and it's a 25-year product that might pay back in 10 years. But it's still, so it can pay for itself a couple of times within its lifetime. It can then, that additional savings can then be used to afford a couple of other things. But your real bell cow here is the lights. Nothing leverages better than the lights, because it's less than a 3-year payback. Thank you, too. Appreciate you having me in.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Reports from the MSBA conference. I'm assuming that's a review, tell a little bit about it.
Christmas. I'll throw those. Brian, I'll be in touch.
Thank you, gentlemen, appreciate you coming.
Take care.
Thank you.
Adrian, Dean, have you guys got something to share from the MSBA conference? You didn't bring back your goodies this year?
I will go real fast because it's getting late. It was a good conference, in my opinion. The first general session was, I actually had to go back. The first general session was about, it was a scholastic reading program. And the guy was talking about coding words. And he really broke it down and was talking about kids learning how to read and all of this bit. So anyway, but you can find that on like the internet, find out what he's talking about, but it was just really interesting. So he was the first speaker. Second general session was Wes Moore. He's the CEO of Robin Hood, one of the largest anti-poverty forces in the nation. His speech was basically about his life. You can go on the internet because he was talking about his first book he wrote, which is The Other Wes Moore, which is about there is another man named Wes Moore in the same town. And that guy went to prison because he went and murdered somebody, and this guy is the CEO of a Robin Hood Corporation. They had the same upbringing, single moms, like his dad died, single moms, but 2 different paths. It was just an interesting story. So he, of course, wrote a book about his story. And he's been to Oxford, and he's very well educated and all that bit. As far as classes go, I went to medical marijuana to hear Kelly Hopkins talk about school stuff, like what your school can do, what your school cannot do. I went to a Grow Your Own Teacher Force. That's kind of big right now. Basically, you look for students who you think might want to be a teacher. Put them in a classroom setting, give them a little taste of it, and then they go off to college, and then they come back and teach at your school. Grow your own. The other thing, that's about, I sat through a meeting about technology and one was about hiring the best, and what I took away from that meeting, this was Republic School. When they hire building administrators, it's not the superintendent brings you like a recommendation. They've got this big long list, they go through these many steps, and basically the superintendent will bring you 3 finalists. And then on the final, interview, you've got teachers, you've got some board members sitting at the table, you've got some other people within your school district, and it's all on a scorecard. You ask them all the same set of questions, you all give them a score, you all decide on the score at the end, and that's kind of how that all goes. it's just a different way to do things. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then lastly, I sat through some meetings about, Apple iPads. So I was in the exhibit hall, and I went by this, Apple stand, and they, of course, looked at me, and I said, I just want the pen. Like, it was this nice blue turquoise pen. I said, I just want the pen. I said, we are a Chromebook school.
They like you. They like to see you come.
I know. I'm like, we already have Chromebooks. Like, Apple iPads are way too expensive. Like, our little Chromebooks are $250 each. We're a poor school. And I said, we'll, never change. And they said, well, wait a minute. And they said that the school iPad price was $295. And then after 3 years, you go trade them in to this one Apple guy, and he will give you $99 back. So now you've taken a $295 Apple iPad down to $200. I'm like, oh, well, that's not a bad deal. So anyway, then I went and sat through these. No. So then I sat through the Apple iPad meetings, and yes, they are different than a Chromebook. Apple's whole pitch, and I know Andrew and this school will never change, and that's fine. Apple's whole pitch is, creativity. A Chromebook, you can go onto Google Docs, do your spreadsheets, blah, 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 blah. The Apple iPad, you go take your little Apple Pencil or the, knockoff pencil, which is like $50, and you can make a whole entire presentation. You can do, interactive notebooks. Each kid, instead of us buying interactive notebooks where they use 5 sheets of paper, and then they bring it home and say, here, Mom, or Dad, or Grandma, everything is on your Apple iPad, all up on the cloud, or like up on the internet, or like up on Google Docs. I'm not saying go one-to-one, but what I am saying is might be something to look into one day. Apples are always pretty secure. Google has kind of been in trouble about, data issues over the years. But their whole pitch is creativity. You can sit in a classroom with your, $50 knockoff pencil and just sit there and take notes. And then you upload it to your drive or whatever you want to. When you get home or on your phone, then you can just look at your notes. If you need to draw with your notes, it's about creativity. But like everything else, you don't want to buy, or you don't want to phase out like the Chromebooks if the iPads meant for function and creativity. You don't want to start buying those if it's going to burden the teachers and it's one more job they have to do. Which means, make the kid get out the iPad. Make them get out their little knockoff pencil. Make them take notes. If it's viewed as one more job, you're just wasting your money. So, anyway, it all started with a blue pen.
And we got a meal out of the deal.
Yeah. But it was.
I will say though, and because I went over there and actually I wrote a text and said, Bill, come here. I'm buying a lot of iBooks or some iPads. I said, oh my God. But in reality, I've had iPads before. We know the old generation iPads. But I will tell you, they are graphically and what they can do are much more high-end than what we're talking in 5 years. And they're much more compatible to Google as well, to Chromebooks. Because they've had to do that. Yeah, they've had to do that to basically reinvent themselves and survive.
Unbelievable.
I don't think IT people like them because maintenance is an issue for them. But I think their IT guy needs to talk to our IT guy, our IT guy, because they talk the same language. But I will say, from what I've seen them do in the past versus what they demonstrated, it's really, really some interesting stuff. The value of that is that we would have to have our teachers make sure that they integrate that and apply that to instruction, because we're not just gonna bring a toy in the classroom. It has to be tied to what they're doing in the classroom. But, and the advantages, I think, cost is one, but we get a Chromebooks that way too, but can they do more than the Chromebooks? One thing I found interesting is all of that is app-driven, app-based. So you can download your apps and so forth, so you don't need Wi-Fi at home. You know, you download the app, you just work on it right there at home. You know, you can be out in the woods, you have no Wi-Fi, but you can still use your iPad, which is something you cannot do with Chromebooks.
So if we ever did go one-to-one, which we probably won't, and they did take them home, you don't need Wi-Fi.
But you gotta have that magic pencil.
No, actually, I mean, you could just use your finger.
You can use your magic finger.
Right, but I mean,
Because I kept thinking $50, but actually it's $350 if you had to have that pencil, but you don't have to have that.
You can use
Right.
your finger.
right. Or,
Or you
yeah.
buy a cheap stylus too, I think.
Right.
Lands on that.
Right. But, you know, anyway, but they showed, there was some app teaching about science. And they, pointed it right on the floor, and this stem and these leaves
Yeah.
just came alive. You could see the water droplets come out of the leaves.
It's called extended reality,
Yeah.
as opposed to.
Well, it'd be like you could
There you
point
go.
it, you could point it
See,
to the
look at me.
table. You could point it to the table and make a plank around the table.
Right.
And then you could walk around it and you look through this iPad rather than at it, right? And you're looking at the table through this sort of window that you've got in your hand. And you can look right up to the cellular level and see how the cells in a body function. You can look at hearts. It was pretty amazing.
Well, what I did find interesting too is that it's all connected to Project Lead the Way with STEM. So they've got their own curriculum tied to iPads. So if we decide to move toward STEM, I think iPads may be something to look at.
And the neat thing about that product, from my perspective, was that it crosses the barriers between Google Docs and Microsoft Office and Apple products. It plays well with everybody, where the others simply do not. And the concern that I have about these devices right here is that this is not what drives American business. This is what drives American education. Educators use these. Business people don't. Google Docs is not the product that business uses. That's what we're teaching our kids, because it's cheap. So, anyway, I think it was an interesting product for us to look at.
You know, and once these die, where do we, where do we take them? Do we go recycle them? You know, like the Apple guy, he's gonna take them back and he's gonna give you money back for them. And then he'll go and dispose of them or whatever. But anyway, so once again, it was a good experience. I would encourage everyone to go. I mean, I always have fun, but
Yeah, and I thought the conference itself was good. I mean, I really liked the keynote, the first guy.
The first guy was
Yeah, 'cause I'm like,
amazing.
man,
It actually
if we
blew
taught
me
reading,
away.
I mean, it just made sense.
Blew me away.
The way to teach reading,
Right.
you know, and.
The difference between decoding and encoding and actually just reading something.
Yeah, it was really impressive.
If you get an opportunity to sign on and watch that
I'd like to get
presentation,
him out here,
do
actually,
it.
if I could. I mean,
Oh,
pretty
gosh, we
extensive.
can get him
He was
here.
good.
He's amazing.
yes, yes, you can.
He
And
will change the way you look at education.
And this is who, this isn't more.
No, this is not
that
more.
First guy, DeClevney or something.
Dr.
Donald
Dickey.
Dickey, Daniel Dickey.
Daniel Dickey.
He was good. He
He
was
was
really impressive.
unbelievably good.
And
He
kind
has
of
a
entertaining
blog.
too. But he was-
And like the blog talks about, it's called, it was, Epiphany.
Yeah.
What was it called? Epiphany? But like, that's his blog.
Well, we signed
You
up.
can read about it.
You signed up for us, I think, but I haven't heard nothing back. Because they were supposed to like get hold of us.
Right.
I wouldn't mind getting somebody like that out, because I think it would be valuable for our teachers, it really would.
Unbelievable.
And then probably the most pertinent form of information that came out is that MSBA will no longer be at Tanterra next year, or Lake of the Ozarks. They're
Yeah, I
moving
hate
it
that.
to the Hilton in Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Downtown Hilton in Kansas City. So it's gonna be a you seem excited about that.
I'm not excited
So
about
it's gonna be
that.
like a 4-hour drive, so, but,
Not.
I've already asked some area superintendents that are probably going to MSBA next year, and most of them said no.
The, who?
Area superintendents. But I'm not sure that, yeah.
That
Lincoln
tends to
Ozarks
be
ain't
down
real far,
next
but
year.
4 hours Kansas City, and we'll waste some time on that. I thought that was kind of.
But I gotta tell you, it's time well spent. I hate to go to those kind of things. Just hate to go to them. I have to force myself. But it is time really well spent. I mean, those breakout sessions, you learn something in every one of those that you can bring back and execute. Super invaluable when you start talking about the policies and the legislation and some of that harder stuff, but there's some softer educational strategies that are just really helpful when you start thinking about long-term strategy for our students.
And Adrian voted?
I did.
Good assembly?
I did.
So our voices were heard.
Well, yes. I mean,
Adrian's voice was heard.
no.
It was, I thought it was good.
But yeah, it was good.
Is Chris in there?
All right. All right, let's move on. In case nobody's watching, the Cardinals are down 7-0.
Oh, this is game 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
They have a hit?
No, I haven't looked that far.
7-0.
Fred?
You bet.
Let's
All right. Oh, good, you have them up here, so I will let you scroll through them, Mr. Hall. So, I'm going to give you an updated middle school math report. We discovered that we had some kids that were not in the original report, and we contacted iReady and got that taken care of. So I apologize for being hoarse. I will tell you that anytime I'm hoarse, that means we had a good meet. So I thank you for rearranging Mr. Hall for putting me at the end tonight because, if I'd known I was going to be 9 o'clock. Yeah, if I'd known it had been 9 o'clock, I would have been showered and looking a little bit better than what I am right now. So anyway, I'm going to try to be as quick as possible with this. One thing I want to point out about all of our levels compared to last year at this time is the fact that we saw a lot of yellow and we saw a lot of red. This year, looking at where our students should be at the beginning of the year, we are seeing a lot more kids that are in green. What does that mean? That means they are on level right now. They may be a tick below if we, like for example, if they're in 4th grade, they may be showing like a late 3rd grade. At the beginning of the year, we consider that on level. If they're in the yellow, they may be, that's tier 2, they are considered at this point in the year anywhere from 1 to 2 years below grade level. And then in the red, we're showing at least 2 years or more below grade level. And so for this time of year, I was really encouraged. If we, I'm kind of interested to see later on in the year where we're at, and then possibly compare that to last year. But most of all, I want to see how our students are growing individually. Now, in the other part of the report that I really want to focus on is this is the placement by domain, and we are in elementary right now. So I was very encouraged by the fact that our kids in grades 1 through 4 are way up there in phonological awareness. Phonics are still kind of we've got a little weak in that right now. Have a lot of yellows and a few reds. But the two, if you look at both middle school and elementary, we don't have high school data, by the way, for right now because they are currently testing, taking their baseline tests. So we don't have any high school data at this time. But if you look at both buildings, comprehension for literature, comprehension for informational text, you notice that we have several reds and several yellows, as well as with vocabulary, and that's something that we want to really that we've been trying to focus on quite a bit over the last few years in all of our buildings, is getting into that higher tier vocabulary. And what do we mean by that? We mean something other than our high frequency words, our words that we use in everyday language. We're talking about words that we might use in, that may be a little bit more academic type language, words that may have, maybe domain specific for a particular subject area. So we want, so that's something that we see across the board, and comprehension for informational text. We see that that matches our map data that we are we typically do well on it, but it's not our strongest suit. So anyway, we are continually looking at that, seeing what ways that we can build vocabulary and that we can improve on the informational text.
Chris, can I just ask one question?
Yes.
I'm sure you've answered this before, but I can't find the answer in my head. If we're identifying tier 1, 2, and 3 by how far behind they are potentially, how do we grade a second grader? I mean, do we have a second grader that's 3 years behind? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
how does that measure transfer across?
That's a good question. We may, in that case where it's where you have such a short window, it may be we may be looking at more of, and Bobby, you may need to help me on this one. It may be more of looking back at first grade, are they like late first grade, early first grade? That may be, or are they at the rock bottom kindergarten? I mean, they're going to be. I mean,
Is that thing really saying these kids are? I mean, is that
at preschool level?
You know what I'm saying?
No, it wouldn't say that, but.
So I'm just saying,
Yes,
is the
go ahead,
first 2 years
help me on
okay?
that, 'cause-
I wrote my
Sorry.
doctoral dissertation on reading. So what it's measuring is what skills should they have at that grade.
Right.
So by second grade, you've got your skills. They should know all of the letters of the alphabet and all of the sounds they make, and then they should have those phonics skills, their blends and vowel sounds and those kinds of things. So they can have those same skills in second grade and be all green, and then my fifth graders, if they're at that level, they're behind. That's what it's measuring.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, if we're using a metric that has a 3-year time scale, how accurate is it for a second grader? I know there are things that we have metric. Well, because it's on target, or it's a year behind, or it's 2-3 years behind, right? That's what I'm saying is, how do you have a first grader that's, how can a first grader be in the red is what I'm saying.
I'd have to look at the cut scores
You know what
to
I'm
see
saying?
what that entails.
It looks like it would be a curve rather than a pyramid. Does that make sense? No?
Sorta.
Kind of? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
But Dr. Spencer's correct. I mean, there's a great deficiency of skills at that level if they're at the second grade level if they're in the red. Like I said, I'd have to look at individual data and see where that cut is, and if it's like at a mid first grade or if it's at for that particular grade level.
So what I was wondering was, if you had that pyramid into 2 different pyramids, and one of the pyramids was first and second graders, and the other was third and fourth graders, what would those 2 pyramids look like?
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, but I don't know the answer to that.
So, okay, so, Dean, when I look at the individual grades, second grade, there's only 2% in the red. So I would think that 2% is reading 3 grades below.
Right.
Now, that's how I interpret this when I'm at my house looking at this data. Is that right or wrong?
Well, I mean, there's on.
You
I mean,
don't
I
need 3
understand.
grades below to be in the red, though, do you?
No.
Have to be 2 or more, right?
Okay, 2 or more.
Usually it's 2 or more, but at second grade, I'd have to double check that. I'd have to see where the cuts are on that one.
Okay, because like first grade, there's no one in the red. So that would mean everyone in the first grade for this first test is on track.
Pretty much.
Well, if they're a tier 2 intervention, though, that means that they've got, if they're in the yellow, that
Right.
means there are some skills that they have deficits in,
Right.
but they're not red flag deficits.
Right.
They need a little help. So those tier 3s are the ones that need the RTI teachers, the reading interventionists and the math interventionists.
I guess my point is just that grades 1 and 2 are not giving us a fair assessment of
the overall building when we look at that. You know what I'm saying? They're bringing the average up because they're all green.
Because they're just working on letter sounds,
Right.
can they sound out a
Right.
word, and, yeah.
Right. I mean, I get that there are metrics, and I know,
Yeah.
you know, I just don't think that when we look at that building total, it maybe is accurate.
It's a little inflated, is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, that's why I look at the grade then.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't mean to
Okay.
be chasing rabbits.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that when I'm at the house, that I'm looking at the right thing here. Okay.
Okay. Bill, can you go ahead and change that over to, I'll let you go ahead and flip it over to middle school. Okay. Once again, last year, yeah, we had, as I mentioned, I mean, I don't want to go to last year, but like I said a while ago, we were looking at vocabulary, comprehension for literature, comprehension for informational text. Once again, that really matches what is being, can you go back down? That matches most of what is being tested, okay? Phonological awareness, that is typically something that, if you look at individual test scores, most of our kids show tested out on that. That is a very early elementary concept, okay? Many of our kids that are testing in the red in phonics are you know, either have are usually receiving services through special education. Okay, but a bulk of our standards that we focus on in especially grades 6 through 8 deal with these three categories. Okay, so it is a lot more reading intensive than what you will see in elementary, even going down to the third and fourth grade. First and second grade is a totally different test, as we were kind of alluding to a while ago. Okay, so anyway, I'm not surprised by this. I am surprised by the number of kids at the tier 3 level on this one. Okay. But what is encouraging though is that we don't have a lot of students at tier 2 itself, and that means that we could get that it would be easier, just as easy to get these kids from tier 2 to tier 1 than these kids from tier 3 to tier 1, and you know, as Dr. Spencer mentioned a while ago, you know, those are the ones that need just a little bit of help, and that may be something where just tutoring would come into play, and rather than an intervention class possibly.
So when I look at the 8th grade and 32% of the kids out of 108 are 105, I'm sorry, are 2 grades below. I mean, what are we doing where, like, they're obviously in after school, you know, tutoring, special ed, I mean, what are we doing for these kids?
Well, the ones that are not in special ed, that are not in, they're not in special ed, and they may be in, and they're in that red zone, they're probably in RTI with.
And we changed the structure of our RTI program this year. It's now a class that replaces an elective. So if you're testing 2 grade levels below, we can't make it mandatory, but you do as a parent. If we suggest and put that child in that class, the parent has to come up and sign a form saying, it's been recommended that my child be in that class, needs it to be able to progress. I'm choosing not to have them in that class. We have that with some of our band students because we only have so many electives built in. But we did change the structure of our RTI classes to make it more effective in targeting those students. It used to be more of a pull out, but now it's a separate class. And as the students progress in it, we rotate them out, we get them back in their elective. We had some this week go, okay, you've made enough progress, let's go to band, and we continue monitoring them, and then we replace them with the next student in line with that program, so.
And they made progress because they took the iReady again and they scored higher? Or just teacher says?
No, iReady has a component
Okay.
with it that they base the lessons on that child's deficiencies.
Right.
And they've been working with that. Kelly Wardle is a reading specialist, and she works closely with them. And
So we did buy that online module now?
For
So many
RTI class.
For RTI class,
Yes.
okay.
How many kids are in that?
We do 10 students per grade. We max those classes out at 10 students per grade level, and special education students aren't included in that because they get their own separate focused help from the special education department. So they are non-special education and non-ELL students that are in that red.
So I interrupted you.
No,
So
you're fine.
with the program that they are doing during school with the iReady, if it says that they're ready to move on, then you go and release them out of this class?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But we do continue monitoring them
Right.
because, you know, we want to make sure that they're continuing to make progress.
So do you think that those 10 kids plus the spec 8 kids is everybody in that 32% in the 8th grade, for example? I mean, are we not getting to all of them yet?
Maybe not all of them. We may have 2 or 3 students just kind of slipping through the cracks. And you always have that student who, you know, you don't get that honest test out of, that may be testing in the red, but you may not have.
Right, just
may not be
didn't
the test.
give any
But
effort, yeah.
For the most part, the teachers really monitor that closely, and the test does a good job of flagging students who take it too quickly, and you get literally a little red flag that says, nope, that kid breezed through that, you need to make him retake it, so. We're working on it, that's what I can say, is we're working on it. We're trying new things this year, and if they don't show improvement, we'll try some other new things next year, so.
Good. When do we get our next look at this?
We'll test again in December.
December.
Yeah, and I believe that window closes in January, so it'll be February before we have another report to you.
Now, next month, we will be doing the APR, and we will be doing the first shot of the balanced scorecard.
Nice.
So, which will include some of this data as well.
Nice. And will we have historical data in there?
I don't think so. I think we're just starting based on it. And this year, you'll find from the APR, I had a long conversation with Superintendent Stuff today, but DESI's not assigning points to it at all. So no one's really sure how they're going to do accreditation, which is kind of interesting. Or set the SAT for that matter, because it's all based on the top performing school districts, and so we're still waiting to hear from them, but it's kind of interesting. And Marty Van Dieven said, don't ask me to figure it, because if I figure it, then I have to make it, it's subject to sunshine law. And I have to share it with whoever wants it. So I can show you how to do it, but if I were you, I wouldn't ask for it, so, okay. So, but that is still embargoed.
It's still embargoed through Friday, I believe.
But then the science scores are coming out here.
Yes, science scores will be coming out on the 16th. They're supposed to lift the embargo on the 17th. I don't expect them to do that on the 17th without us having a chance to appeal science scores, so. Okay. And the last two on here were math, elementary math and then elementary science. And our four major domains that we test on: number and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. Very encouraged right now by the elementary scores. Once again, you'll probably see, if you look at this part of the report, you're going to see that you're going to pretty much see similar data. Okay, this part is where you're going to see the difference between the two buildings. Okay, so right now, if you notice, our yellow is much bigger, but our top tier 3 we're at 4%. So that is very encouraging, and I'm kind of interested to see as the year progresses how much how much improvement we see. So, you can see that as we go from grade 1 to grade 2, 3, and 4, that we go from, we start to get into more complex, material. And so that's why you probably see a little bit more, more red and a lot more yellow in grades 3 and 4. And then.
And yet math is really better than reading.
At this point in the year, yes.
In that building.
And I think if you compare to last year, I think a lot of it too, if you compare the August test last year to the August and September test this year, is the fact, that we know what we're doing a little bit more with iReady. Last year we went into this cold turkey and the kids didn't know what to do, we didn't know what to do, and we knew we were given a test, and that was about it. But as far as providing guidance, what is the kid supposed to actually do on here without ever seeing any items? I think we have a better handle on that part of it, so the logistical part of it. So anyway, that's I think that's a big part of the difference we're seeing between last year and this year. But yeah, this is very encouraging, I think. If you want to go on down to middle school, and once again, and if you lay this in MAP scores side by side, I'm not really surprised by our tier 3 numbers. And then once again, especially we get past getting to 6th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the standards totally change. And even though we have the same domains, you have a lot more complex problems that are being thrown at them, and this is where you start to see a little bit more reading involved. In each year, you see more and more reading involved, and it's not just computation. Okay, and so.
Nevertheless, the math scores in the middle school are far superior than the reading scores.
Right.
Right? And so if the problems are more reading, that would tend to draw that down instead of
it would
drive it up. So really, I'm guessing the new reading program in the elementary school is designed to resolve some of this?
Oh, yes, yes.
I'm sitting here looking, I'm thinking, this is our 3rd year Eureka, our math scores are reflecting that.
Mm-hmm.
Give us 2 years in our new reading series, and I think we'll see the same results.
Good. And every teacher I've talked to in the elementary, and Bobby's mentioned this to me as well, is the fact that that what we're seeing in the new reading series is kind of a reflection of what's being tested in iReady as well. It's not written to the test because they're two completely different companies, but you know the rigor that both of them have are pretty much equal.
And they're reflective of the state adequacies.
Correct.
So.
All right. And since you're scrolling so fast, I'm trusting that's it.
That was it.
Okay.
Last one.
I just have one kind of comment. This might be off in the weeds, just one little bit here. So I have heard twice tonight that we are still figuring out the reading series, which is fine because it's brand new. And then I've heard that last year we really didn't know what we were doing with the iReady test. I think we're buying this stuff at the wrong time of year. Because summertime, the teachers scatter, we're all gone, it's, nothing's getting done with the teachers doing things, and that's in the, summer months. Why don't we, what if we would have bought the reading series at Christmas time and then had some professional development, let the teachers look at it from January to May, and then go on summer vacation?
I think on the reading, on the reading series, I believe we had the teachers come in for training.
Eureka, going back to it, we did buy it in January and had it throughout. With the reading series, we did purchase it a little bit later, but in the end of July, first week of August, Don Newberry came in, 1 grade level per day, and had professional development with them, and they actually planned the first couple of weeks of school, and that's her job.
But like, that's their first look at it? Like
Well,
the teachers?
They had the manuals in hand.
Okay.
At the end of the school year. So they had it to peruse through, but then in late July and August, each grade level came in a different day for 6 hours of in-depth training in it.
And when was that, in August?
Yeah, last week of July, first week of August.
And that was for one day?
1 day for each grade level.
And now your professional development day, though, is building more into the reading series?
Well, on September 16th, we actually had, because in the purchase price, there was 6 hours of professional development from a company representative. And she came in on September 16th after we'd been in it for 6 weeks and was able to answer questions, give us direction on where we're going. And it's just like anything new, the more involved, they'll be more comfortable with it, in January than they are today. It's just a process of going through it.
To go off what you said, I, believe it or not, I actually agree with kind of where your thought process was. We're asking our teachers to start, we get this in the summer, and throw them into real-time productivity in August.
Exactly.
If you start studying for a test in January, you know you have to take it in August, you'll do better in August because you studied for 6 months. We're asking our staff to learn this stuff in a period of such a short period of time, where, quite frankly, they're not focused anyway.
Yeah.
We all have summer vacations, families, baseball, softball, everything else we're doing. It's not a budget issue. It's a commitment issue. And I like where we're going with some of the math and some of it. And, yeah, you know where I'm going. And some of the reading, I like the reading stuff. But I agree, I think if we gave our teachers more of a heads up to work with it and learn it, it's tough to learn, to be teaching one subject and learning another. But I think that's what we should be doing. I think we cram it in. I know you guys have committees, you review it, you look at it, and then all of a sudden we have a PD day, and then we use it for 6 weeks, and then we find, oh, crud, we were doing it wrong. Let's change this, let's do that. Because you're right, for the last 2 years we've heard we didn't really know how to do it. We didn't really know how to implement it. We didn't really know what we were doing with it when we were using it. You don't drive a car unless you've practiced and you know what you're doing. Don't teach my kids unless we've practiced and we know what we're doing.
But you can't learn until you're behind the wheel.
I understand it, but don't do it on a public road. My child's a public road. Do it in your driveway. Practice your car in the field. Don't give our teachers a book and say, teach my kids how to do this, because that's where we're winding up with, no offense, 1 out of every 4 kids in the middle school I wouldn't hire in 4 years. Because somewhere along there's been a disconnect that got created, and we're saying we're fixing it now. What happens to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders between now and when they graduate school? And I saw on the list we have mock interviews coming up. I'd like to interview some of those kids. Guarantee I wouldn't hire one of them because they couldn't answer the questions I'm asking. And I'm not criticizing our teachers. We're not prepping our kids for real life when they leave here. And what I didn't hear anywhere in any of this, number one, this is great, this is a snapshot of right now. What we should be seeing, in my opinion, is if I see grade 8 here, I should see what the grade 7 score was right above it. I want to see did that kid progress from the last time he was tested. I don't want to see what he tested today, and we're not looking at individuals. Did grade 8, did they excel over where they were as grade 7, or did they fall behind? If so, what happened between grade 7 and grade 8? Why are we not catching that mistake that's going on? What's happening with kids? I don't want to blame it on special ed. I don't want to blame it on kids with IEPs or in, what was it, I'm sorry, Ms. Spencer, the RTI, program for the reading. I don't want to say that kids aren't getting what they need, but somewhere something's disconnected. Our elementary scores are great, and about 4th grade we start seeing the dip coming into play. 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, it doesn't get any prettier. It looks like a freaking Christmas tree, folks. That's not what I want to see. And I can't tell you anything about grade 8 because I don't know where they are in grade 7 from this. And go back and dig out my books and look at the last time we got these. Great. That's what I should have seen tonight, is what grade 7 was last year compared to grade 8 this year. That's what I need to see. I think I agree with you 100%, which is unusual for me, I know. But I think that if we're going to put a series in place, June and July is not the time to be, and May is not the time to be presenting it to the board to make a decision for us to rush in and get it bought and then put it in place in July to get 2 PD days in or 2 trainings in and then cram it down and get our kids working on something that our teachers don't even know how to use. Give it to them in January. So we need to be talking about it in September, October, and November and making a decision and buy it and give it to them to spend 6 months studying it and learning about it.
No, actually, we need to be talking about it before July 1 from
So we can get it in the budget.
Our budget.
I agree.
Right.
But it needs to be, the PO needs to be issued, and it needs to be purchased and here and delivered. We're always chasing our tails. I think that's one of my problems, is we're chasing it in here. We're not getting ahead of it, we're chasing it. You told me not to get on my soapbox. I'm on my soapbox. So everybody can disagree with me, that's fine. We all have our opinions.
Wouldn't there be a significant curriculum change from 7th to 8th grade math?
Yes, depending on which path you're on. If you're going from 7th grade math into 8th grade, you're taking more of a kind of pre-algebra type approach, and then some kids may have taken that pre-algebra class in 7th grade. Now they are, and they may be taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So
That'd be a significant curriculum change. The
Yes.
data from 7th to 8th grade would be apples to oranges.
I disagree 100%. I think a child that learns math in 7th is going to show a performance level that you can have, that you can gauge whether or not they're applying what they have learned before if you look at the 8th grade level. Algebra and calculus are different things, but yet we judge our kids with A's, B's, C's, and D's. We're grading, I'm not trying to grade algebra to pre-algebra. We've got not seniors, but we got freshmen in high school taking 7th grade pre-algebra, 8th grade pre-algebra stuff, okay? This 28% here is what concerns me. And I understand, yeah, there may be a difference in the course they're taught from 7th to 8th, but did this number grow or did this number go down? If it grew, why? We need to find out why. What are we doing that's allowing that number, that red, to get bigger and bigger and bigger?
Well, and part of what you're seeing there too, like my 8th graders who took Algebra 1, took the Algebra 1 test, not the 8th grade math test. So the top kids in the class took the Algebra 1, and so you wouldn't see the same kids' scores because they were pulled out of the whole group.
Wait,
So
they took what Algebra 1 test?
They took
math.
Oh, I'm sorry, math, okay, you're talking about the iReady still, okay.
I will say, the iReady data, if you break it down to individual student, you can, I go on there all the time, and you can click historical data, and you can see what that student did last year.
Right.
And you can do it, and that's what our intervention is, that's what we're using the data day on October 21st to. The thing about iReady is it's transferable from teacher to teacher, so the teacher can see historical data and where that student is weak. And I mean, that's what we're working on. Every individual student is different. iReady has that data for us, which domain they're the weakest in. So while you're not getting that individual data here, I mean, it's accessible to our teachers.
And I don't want individual data, because I don't want to know what your
certain
teachers doing
student,
or
yeah.
anything
You
else.
can see that.
I want to see as a cumulative whole, did our students from the 7th grade progress from the 8th grade? If not, somebody needs to be explaining to me, Lucy. You know, if they went backwards, why? If we went from 11%, I mean, next time we do this, if I see grade 7, 11%, and now they're grade 8 and it's 28%, somebody better be finding me some dadgum answers. Because we've done something wrong. How do you double your numbers within this group? So I mean, I'd be curious when we did this last time, what was grade 7? What was in the red? Because now they're grade 8, and there's 28% of those kids are in the red. And according to everything we're sitting here talking about, that's at least 2 years behind pace. So if they were green or yellow in grade 7, but now they're 2 years behind, that means they're grade 6, but they're in grade 8. But last year, they were still grade 6. They're not getting something. That's what I want to see. And the reason it's so important to me is I understand you guys are looking at it on an individual student basis because you're working one-on-one with them. The 7 people in this room don't do that. We spend the money to buy what you ask us to do based on blind representations that I can't tell if we're achieving or falling further behind. That's my problem. I've looked at middle school numbers for 4 years now. So this is not directed at you. This is just 4 years worth of history. there's a disconnect between elementary and middle school, in my opinion. What it is, I don't know. I understand the kids are changing, mentality changes, everything changes. But we weren't doing this 4 years ago. I got last year's data to look at. If we're gonna do it, give us something more than just the snapshot of right now, so we can compare that.
I think you also need to expand that to international data, because what I know from writing my dissertation on reading is that our data lines up with what we see internationally. Scores start out really well because you're working with finite skills. I can learn 26 letters of the alphabet easily, but vocabulary is a whole different thing. That's not finite. But at the 17-year-old internationally, we have made no progress in reading at the 17-year-old stage since 1971, when they started measuring those scores internationally.
I really don't give a crap if we can hire a kid in China.
I know.
What I care about is the kids we're graduating from.
Right, and that's it's
That's
very
why I sit in
personal
this
to
room,
us.
so I don't care about the international data, I don't care about Arkansas's data, and I don't give a crap about New York State. I care about what happens here. And what I'm seeing is that we don't have a positive trend. I see that we have a gap somewhere where we're getting kids stuck in the red, and I can't hire these people. The employers in town can't hire these kids. So what are we doing? How do we fix that? They're not all gonna go to college. How do we fix that? And how do we make decisions in this room? I say, I'm sorry I don't care about China and Mexico and France and Germany and all their scores. That doesn't make any difference to me. Our kids will live right here.
It's about how kids learn, though, and it's about figuring out how we help them to learn.
But we need to be able to see, I understand what Shane's saying, we need to see the historical data lined up with this, so we know whether what we're doing is we're gaining or losing.
Is it doing any good?
Yeah, are we treading water, or are we?
And treading water's not good enough.
No.
If our objective is to tread water, we have failed miserably.
Well, I can speak for the three of us here. None of us want to be treading water.
Right.
I think I would hope that there's some trust level that we work every day to try to make all those scores better and all of our kids to succeed. And we're always looking, whether it be the international data or whatever means we can find to boost those scores and get those kids where they're at and make them hireable for you. That's our goal.
I believe that, we just like to see it.
Sure, yeah, I have no problem with that. I just want to reaffirm that
Yeah,
that we want the same
all you
thing.
can do. It's not that I
Yes.
don't think you're doing what you can do, but as a board, what can we do?
Sure.
And if we don't have the metric to look at that in a way that makes sense to us, because to you, and you just said it, Bobby, you look at every student. So you have a privilege we don't have. Yet, we're the ones that have to give you the privilege to spend the money to buy what you want. But we're doing it, and I've said this a lot of times, trusting the administrators. I believe you guys have their best interest at heart. I believe you're trying absolutely what you can do, but for 4 years of sitting here, I've seen a struggle once they leave elementary and go into middle school. And that bothers me, because once they get to that point of prepubescence, they start down a path, one way or another. And I don't see us, I haven't seen any correction in the last 4 years. And I don't know how to correct it. And the only thing I'm getting is the data, and what I'm telling you is I don't see the data that helps me to know that I've done, not I, but this group has done anything with how long have we had the math series now, Bonnie?
This is our third year.
Okay, so a fifth grader would have it in fourth, third, second grade.
For 2 years, and the sixth graders would have it for 1 year.
So if our fifth graders have gone downhill in our math scores, what are we doing? That's where the assessment I'm looking for is, because they've come from one segment of our education to another segment of our education. And if they have happened to have gone downhill, we're saying that we're doing better with some things. We're not looking at a fifth grader compared to what they were then and now, and I understand there's a difference in the curriculum. But the learning, as you said, there's a curve. And the curve is supposed to be like this. It doesn't go up and down. It's supposed to be a continual learning curve up. We need to find the gap. I know I'm fighting an uphill battle, and that's fine. You guys are too, and I know that.
With respect to the data, Chris, could we get longitudinal data on that already? 1. 2, with the balanced scorecard that's coming in pretty quick, can we not put prior year than this year so we can see what that class has done?
It would make our balanced scorecard very, very complicated. I mean, we're talking going from a one-page document to possibly 3 or 4 page document.
I read 71 pages of policy. I'm okay with 4 pages.
And then the other question on the iReady, if you look at that, because the standards are different every year, right? And what the kids are being taught and tested on every year is different because it goes up. Is it apples to apples, even though we're comparing seventh graders last year to eighth graders this year, because what they're being tested on is different? Is that correct? Because their expectations are higher.
Right.
Right. But for example, seventh grade pre-algebra kids typically go into eighth grade algebra.
Correct.
So you're not really,
It's a continuation of the same learning curve.
right, so you're not really, now this is just my little mind, you're not, separating students out because your pre-algebra kids go into algebra. So you've still got your other 75 kids over here. And then, yes, they go take the eighth grade test. Well, these, 75 don't have algebra yet because they're just gonna take pre-algebra in eighth grade.
No, they take math 8 in 8th grade. We
I'm
don't
sorry,
offer,
I'm sorry, right.
we only offer pre-algebra in 7th grade.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So they're gonna take math 8. So I can see why they would be behind some, but it's still, they're still moving up in their math skills. Is that kind of correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm done.
Lies, damn lies, and statistics.
There's a lot of ways to parse the data. If we look at it consistently and we see we get more kids in the green and less kids in the red, then we're closing the gap, right? And we can parse data all we want to, but at the end of the day, we have to trust that our administrators are down in the weeds with it, kid by kid,
Now,
right?
when we do subsequent tests on this, because we did it last year, on 3 or 4 different occasions, and it seems to me each time we showed fewer kids in the red, more kids in the green. So throughout the year, we could show that progress. So we could see growth in individual grades. And there were very few grades that didn't show growth.
And they're tested on the same criteria.
Correct, all year long. The 7th grader when they started in September, and that 7th grader when they finished up in April, May. So we can see progress there. How to transfer that from year to year is the difference. I mean, we just need to think about it and see what we can do to give you the information that you need. But I will tell you that throughout the year, we've done, 3 different tests on already? 4?
3.
We get 3. So we do 3, so you have three opportunities to see growth. And the data last year bore that out, that throughout the year,
We closed the gap.
yeah, we did close the gap, all right? But again, just to be fair, is it because of quality instruction or is it maturation? Did they do better just because they got older? Or did they do better because we did something to intervene?
I guess my problem is.
That's the
with
science of
data.
learning, you know?
If we, and I don't disagree, last year we showed the gap closing from the reds and the greens. But then if we see the gap widen at the beginning of this year, now I understand you've got the summer loss, and kids coming back, and they have to get refreshed and back reintegrated into the system again. And you can close that gap again all year long this year, but if our kids, if they're closing the gap, that means they're behind the start. So are they really learning where they should be, or are they learning just what they need to learn to be where they need to be on here? I'm more, maybe my mind works differently than everybody else does. I want to see that a child comes from 7th grade to 8th grade and doesn't go from 60th position in his class, 39th position in his class. And that's a whole different type of ranking, but the principle is the same. They shouldn't lose that much. If we're having a firm foundation of education, I don't think they should lose that much by the time we do our first I-Ready test. They should be back to where they were. That's why I want to see 7 from last year, close of year, to 8 of this year, beginning of year. What are we losing? And then, does it take us all year to get back to that point where the gap is back where it was? Or do we recover it right off the bat? Do we pick up and run? Or are we in recovery mode for the first 6 months of the year? If we're in recovery mode,
Well, if we're in
fix
recovery
that?
mode, then the answer to that is we need year-round school. Because that'll avoid the summer slide. Because my argument would be, because I would almost, I mean, we could pull the numbers and look at it, but my argument would be that those scores, this first time through this time, are lower than they were at the end of the year, 7th grade year. I believe that to be true. I think the gap widened. The kids didn't change, right? But they didn't have instruction for like 3 months, okay? So then we get instruction and we start closing the gap again. And then it widens again, right? Because we have summer slide and they don't have it. Our summer school, and we've had this conversation, I think we need to beef up our summer school because quite honestly, I don't see our summer school
It's not education.
Yeah, I mean, let's just face it, it's not, there's no rigor, all right? So that's not helping any. So, yeah, we can do that.
And that's our fault.
I agree.
And we can do that, I mean, we can have trimesters just go year-round school and we'll never have the gap. You know, we can maintain that, you know?
You know,
That's-
the
that's
other
a tough
thing is,
decision to do.
it's a lot harder to take a kid who's 3 years behind in the 4th grade and catch him up in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, right? So the other thing that we need to be watching here is how much green is in that first year and how much can we keep those subsequent years in the green. The more green we have in those lower years, the more we're gonna have in the upper years. So not only let's just follow this cohort class through, but what have we changed fundamentally about how we teach kids in every grade level so that they progress, so that the entire school benefits, right? And not just a cohort class. I think you have to look at it both ways. But I like the summer school conversation.
And it's not like anyone else, because almost all districts do it the same way. But ADA drives it. That's just the reality of it. So,
Let's do it for our kids.
Got it with Ira.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, we're glad you came, Chris.
Thanks.
A few other things, got parent-teachers conferences coming up Thursday, is
yes,
that right? 2 to 7?
yes, 2 to 7.
School's
2 to
closed.
5 for the middle school.
Seven,
Yeah.
seven.
STEM lab will be open
2
5
to
to
5 for
7.
the middle school.
5 to 7.
You're not even listening.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll be going about 5, so we might want to show up early.
School's closed Friday and Monday,
Yes,
okay? Senior night's coming up October 24th
correct.
for volleyball, and October 25th for
Everything else.
football, band, cross-country, cheer,
Correct.
softball, and tennis.
Mhm.
Good.
Winding them down.
We don't have any guests tonight, are you guys good? Any comments over there?
I do.
All right, very good. We'll move on to items for action. Do what?
They've had all they want.
No. Items for action. Who wants to list policies?
The motion would be to table JHC and then the others as.
Yep, and DFA.
changes.
As discussed.
Okay, who wants to make a motion to approve policies as discussed?
I'll make that motion.
By Danny.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. It's time to renew our MSBA policy maintenance agreement. I'd receive a motion to approve.
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Best money we spend all year.
Aye. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. You want a special board meeting?
Yes, I'd like to, and
Yeah,
I
just meet twice that week.
What's
You
that?
gonna make us meet twice that week?
Yeah, yes. November 14th, Thursday. Can y'all do it?
Oh, you better.
I know, I'm good. I cleared Farrell.
I went through.
Because I'm like, okay, the
I
700
went through
Farrell's
your
what I gotta
execution.
nail down here. I know.
That date works for everybody?
It's like 3 days after our board meeting, but, you know, 3, 4. Provide food.
About 5 to 8.
Will we feed them?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Ribeye,
Uh-oh.
baked
I've
potato.
got a motion by
Spending
Glenn.
money on
Do I have a second?
Second.
And Farrell, second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. And opposed? Anything else tonight?
That's it.
I'd receive a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Very good, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
No, so.
All right, Bill.
November 14th at 5.
Yeah.
So, let me just give you a little bit of feedback on this. This thing timed out like 16 times during the